We're gonna be chatty today, so we're gonna have to kind of settle in a little bit. So treat it like an AMA, whatever. Chime in the message. I would love to hear from everyone. But we are launching this massive doorstop of a volume. Hey, John, what's going on? Um, I had a reader, long time reader that say, "Hey, why don't you take your stories and essays that you've put out there? Hey, Jeremiah, what's going on? JDS, I don't know what you go on there. Um, why don't you hey John, why don't you take your stories and essays and bind them into a paperback?" And I was like, "This has got to be like 50,000 words worth, right?" And he said, "I think you have probably 5 essays that are 10,000 words each." Hey, buddy. And 10 10,000 words each. So that's at least 50,000. I said, "Well, you think it would be over 100,000 words?" And he was like, "I think more." And so we put this together. I had to change the publication size 5 times. And now it is like Brandon Sanderson levels of blunt force trauma. I think you have to roll a D12 if you try to attack someone with this in Dungeons and Dragons. So, yeah. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna settle in, and we're just gonna read. I'm gonna switch off personal essays. I'm gonna do some academic abstracts. I'm gonna drop the link here. We're gonna give people a little bit more time to filter in. Let's see, the Omni Lighthouse. I'm gonna send you the bookshop link. But basically what this is a print. You rolled a 15. Yeah, no. The DC on hitting me is at least an 18, JDS. Hey, CG. Um, all right. This is the one on Bookshop. It's not showing the cover for some reason, but that's the bookshop link. But basically, this is a chunk of Substack essays. Now, these are essays I published in, the one I did in the World Series of Poker Pro that I rehosted here, the one I published in the New Haven Review, which we'll read. That was a long time ago, actually. The New Haven Review one. Hey, Brooke. That ended up that was a first chapter that sold of Bellhammers. The other one sold to the Misty Review in London. I don't know if they're still around some other places, but so that's in here. It's got the essay from the Poets Market, which that's way up there in the dusty archive of this Brooklyn apartment. But anyway, so there's all kinds of different things in here from different pieces, different bits, but it's just it's a compilation of supposed to be short stuff. But here we go. So yeah. So if at any point you want to chime in, hey, you think I should read an essay or a story first? Let's do that. Does anyone have any preference for an essay, a story? I don't know how many people are at their keyboards, but we're just going to get into this right up. What's up, Glenn? It's good to see you. Good to meet you at the New York City Poetry Festival. I hope to see you in person again soon. Anyone have a essay? Essay. Okay, we'll do a personal essay. That's right off the front. So right off the front here, I mean, it's, you can see the table of contents is a bit hefty. So, hey, Kevin, so good to have you here. If y'all, all right, I mean, anyone in here, you should follow their Substack. There's so many wonderful people in here, but so far of the list I've seen, Kevin's probably the only one writing consistently on music. And if you haven't seen his stuff, you should definitely check it out. But Naked with a Wolf is the one we're going to read first. It's right off the front since Glenn asked for an essay. You ready? Let's buckle up. I got my catheter on so I can really do, the senatorial long-term filibuster thing here. So Naked with a Wolf, here we go. When you say that you want to go into full-time nonprofit community service, you think this means soup kitchens and speeches, and you do not think that this means climbing into a bathtub naked with a wolf. This is not a metaphor. When I encounter phrases like the Ministry of Justice or the Ministry of Magic or even the word ministration, I think of ministering, such as administering a bandage on a wound, administering a catheter into a bladder, administering a diaper onto a butt. Often that includes event planning. Often it includes clerical work, forms, paper. Even more often it includes menial tasks, cleaning up tangible physical messes for folks. It ain't pretty. There's a lot of dirt, body fluids, stenches, and awkwardness in most administering towel and basin. It's not mostly podcasts and rhetoric. It's not mostly concerts or short stories. It's not even mostly persuasion, parties, initiation rites, and sewing rituals. At its best, it may well be what some call becoming a spiritual director, and at worst, it's just another seasonal gig. At its average, I'm suddenly a certified nurse's assistant again, just without hospital overtime, without a full time team behind me. This kind of administration, true nonprofit service, is mostly a readiness to point out where Providence shows up in the great big mess of every day, because every day I wake up with my perfect plan of how my administering nonprofit service will go, and every day Providence interrupts me with some inconvenience I must rightly consider if I ever hope to go on the adventure set out before me. So, I was playing board games with one set of neighbors when one of the kids knocked on the door asking for help on his bike, and finished. I had axle grease all over my hands. It's hard to roll brand new dungeon crawler dice with axle greased hands, but while washing my hands, I got to share with the first set of neighbors about my relationship with the second set of neighbors, the kids, and both sets grew from the encounter. An inconvenience rightly considered as an adventure wrongly considered is an inconvenience. G.K. Chesterton on running after one's hat. Yeah, I was planning to call patrons when Tara asked me to help move the air conditioner, which included borrowing a car from another neighbor. I was annoyed, but I ended up talking about my weakness as a New York City driver. That neighbor not only helped me adjust to New York City driving, he helped me process through a frustration I didn't have words for regarding out of town visitors who don't understand the culture here and who take it out on us or fellow New Yorkers passive aggressively. He also prodded me on an issue that I ended up sharing my heart. And so we had a great talk with the air conditioner owner, and I got AC goo all over my good pants, cut my thumb 4 times like you do while gripping aluminum cooling fins far too hard, and came back with 2 hours left in my day. Another person in town needed help. I canceled the rest of my appointments, helped them with some survey work, and in the process was encouraged more than I have been all year to keep doing what we're doing, maintain the vision, maintain the culture, finish the task. No calls were made. Inconvenience rightly considered. It's a smelly hug with the homeless guy. It's holding the weeping girl as she cries mascara all over your only white dress shirt left without stains. It's greeting the New Yorker who says, "My hands are dirty," and reaching out to shake his hand anyway because, hey, dude, Jesus touched lepers, man, right? So dirty hands are small change and on like a cosmic scale, right? And then realizing he'd wiped his butt with his hands. And it's suddenly not so cool. But considering he'd been screaming outside the diner for the better part of an hour with no one to stop and help him, washing my hands was a small price to pay to go on the adventure of staring strangers who'd ignored him in the eye and smiled. "But your hands," they asked, "are washable," I said and smiled. "Some days it's like that. On the other hand, some days you climb naked into a bathtub with a full-grown American gray wolf." One of our neighbors here, a young friend and artist, was practically dying. She's fashion stylist. She was very, very ill, and we were very, very worried for her, and we didn't know how to help her. And so Tara suggested I walk her dog. Her dog has a foot-long snout and the better to see you with eyes, and the better to eat you with teeth. Her dog is an American gray wolf from one of the few wolf rescues in the United States. I honestly don't think she's legally allowed to own this thing. How can you keep a wolf in New York City? Not a wolf dog, a wolf, as in Little Red Riding Hood, and as in the Three Little Pigs, and as in Peter. And this wolf sometimes poses for high-dollar photo shoots. I won't post the pictures, but you know the actors who have co-starred with this wolf. He had to go on long, long walks to even get ready to poo, as in 30 blocks. And I had to keep him on a 6-inch leash because of how strong he is. Often I had to literally belay his leash around my entire body, as if he's a mountain climber and I'm the guy trying to create a counterweight to save him, or more likely some innocent bystander from certain death. The walks were going pretty good. He freaked out a bit, but he was doing okay. And then Tara and I showed up later in the day, and he crapped and peed all over his cage and flung it all over this woman's nice Persian rug. Did I mention that wolves are smarter than dogs? Because they are. They very much are. They're like corvid dolphins with jaws the size of jaws. This wolf knew exactly what he was doing. He was mad to be in his crate. He wanted out, regardless of whether or not Mom was sick and dying, and Tara offered to steam the rug and help clean the house while I took him to the doggy car wash. We found these self-service dog wash places where you can shampoo your dog the same way you shampoo your car. It's great. I walked 20 blocks. He went number one, number two. Number two had bones in it, large bones. Why large bones? Because this American gray wolf eats large, raw, bone in porterhouse steaks or college interns. I wasn't there, I mean, maybe he eats college interns every day because you start to see how this becomes a mind game between you and the wolf. Well, the first place was open. The wolf knew the place and started yanking me around the store and flailing and digging in his back paws. And turned out their self-serve was closed at 4:30. Tried to go uptown, but that one was closed. We walked another 20 blocks west of the place near Washington Square. Also closed at 5:30. It's 7 p.m. I text the girls, every place is closed and they don't want a wolf. I didn't add, I don't blame them. The wolf's mother texts back, I guess bathtub it is. Now, I'd been texting the girls off and on while trying to walk a wolf. Texting and driving is bad. Texting and trying to maintain your alpha status as the leader of a wolf pack is worse, although, the whole alpha male thing has been debunked. Particularly when you consider how alpha males don't exist. The last text was the last straw for this wolf's boredom, and the wolf freaked out. He jumped up like a kingfisher, and he grabbed the leash in his jaws, and he yanked harder than a marlin. He leapt and fully extended on his hind legs. He's much, much, much taller than me. And he scratched me. I'm wearing this nice herringbone jacket we got at a thrift store. He bites my left bicep and tricep, not to kill, but the way he'd bite a pack member he intends to challenge. Problem is, the last person he bit that way had 22-inch, not 22-inch, but 22-inch, punctuation matters here, deep puncture wounds all up and down their forearm and hand. That was the previous dog walker. So were there ever an argument for a young artist wearing a tweed blazer, non-ironically as I often do, this has got to be it. So the bruise was green. It was tennis ball size the next day. There's a hole in my jacket, but I was spared death by punctured bicep. I don't know what else to do, right? None of the supposed posturing worked. None of the leash snapping worked. Eat your heart out, Cesar Millan. The more I fought with this wolf, the more he fought me. Large crowds on the sidewalk near the Alamo Astor Place cube gave us a wide, wide berth, and I became very, very afraid. I knew he could smell my fear, so I tapped into my flight response, and I shouted, "Come on, let's go!" and took off at a dash down the sidewalk around NYU. He yanked me for a while, and he went into this slow gallop. And for the record, I used to be a 100-meter dasher and a 300-hurdle sprinter. I used to play wide receiver. I used to be the guy in baseball who'd get on first base every time, but couldn't hit a home run to save my life. I'm a fast dude when I want to be. I chased down an express city bus from my buddy's wallet once. I'm not talking one of those every 2-street local lines. Still, I was going full speed, and the wolf was barely jogging, was not winded, or at a gallop pace was pulling me. That's the most terrifying thing. Had I desperately wanted to in an emergency, I would never, ever outrun this gray wolf. Perhaps this is why for bears, the Alaskans advised me, if it's brown, lay down. If it's black, fight back. But never flee in terror. We got back to the place, and his mom asked me to tie him to the banister while we clean up. She's to the point where she's getting winded from laughing from walking up a couple flights of stairs. She went to bed for a bit. I started scrubbing wolf droppings off the massive crate in the bathtub with a pitcher. Tara steam cleaned a 100-square-foot rug and another one that ran the length of the hall. We did dishes and things, scrubbed and scrubbed while Mom rested. And after an hour or so, I asked this mom how best to bathe this wolf home. "You're going to have to get naked with him," she said. "Excuse me?" "You'll need to climb into the bathtub naked with him," she said again. "Okay," I said. I was not all right. Remember, you've never seen pictures of me below the face, nor do you know when this happened, who scheduled it, if I dictated it from my hospice pad. You have no idea how this ends. If you put him into the bathtub and stay clothed, he'll think you're doing something to him. If you get in first, he'll want to join the pack and will just come right in with you. And doing something to him isn't great? I asked. It ends badly, she said. I thought of the last guy with the puncture wounds in his hands. Naked with the wolf, I said. Got it. Any advice? Use the shower head? At first, she said, you'll have to get him to stand to get his belly. Use the rose shampoo. I figured if we have to do it, he might as well come out smelling like roses. I'll come out smelling like roses if you say so. Anything else? Make sure the shower door handle is on the side next to the toilet and the shower head. If it's on the back side of the tub, he'll make a mess of things. How so? He'll climb out. I basically wailed my next question. Of the shower? Yes. Like over the wall? Yes. The entire wall of the shower? Yes. So door handle definitely on the toilet side? Definitely. Yes. Okay. Here we go. She waited. I closed the baby gate. Hilarious in retrospect. The baby gate holding back a freaking American gray wolf. And then I went to get the wolf. He saw me, and he peed all down the stairs in the 4th-floor walk up. He was trying to prove a point. I went in, and I got paper towels, and I started sponging them up, refusing to untie him. He tried gnawing on me to get me to untie him. I refused. I dodged it. Eventually, I got around him deep enough to get it all cleaned up, and then he was turned loose, and it was just a tug of war between us. I got him into the bathroom, and I closed the door, and then I became painfully aware that I was inside a 6 foot by 6 foot cell with a full-grown wolf. This is not what I had in mind when I went to college to be trained for nonprofit service. Normally, this is the part when my own dog, mere English Cocker Spaniel, freaked out. The wolf didn't. He just started being ornery, climbing onto the sink, biting cleaning supplies, tongue scrapers, tubes of toothpaste. I got it all out of him, and I tried not to draw his attention to the clothes I was taking off because he really likes ripping fabric, and I got down to my skivvies, and I prayed the prayer St. Francis prayed to the fire and the hot iron before they tried to sear out his cataracts. Brother Wolf, God made you beautiful and wily, fast and strong. I pray you be tender with me. And then naked, the boy entered the shower and turned on the shower head, and the wolf entered the arena. I started to sing. I had no idea if it would calm him, but it calmed me. I've sung to trees and birds before. Why not a wolf? And then I closed the door slowly behind, his 3-foot-long tail slipping inside. I've seen that exact shot in horror films. And then there in the water, what was left of the boy who had moved to New York City died. Died right there in the neighbor's shower stall, surrounded by shedding fur. The boy died. The man was born. I've heard of rites of passage. This was surreal. I mean, I wouldn't have considered myself a boy or even necessarily a coward. I was 30 for crying out loud when this happened. I looked like one of those wide-eyed Brooklyn toddlers whose face reads, I have seen things. Yet there's something about tearing off all your armor and stepping under the waters with a wolf. There's something about washing him slowly of all the crap he'd rubbed all over himself. It was as soothing as the older gentlemen and older ladies I used to clean up at the hospital, but the older folk couldn't kill me. As soothing as combing the dead lice out of a dear friend's ruined hair, but the lice, if they got off, couldn't eat me. At least not on a gray wolf scale, at a gray wolf pace. So there was this deep respect and honor involved as well, as if I needed to bow as a courtesy before shampooing this Lovecraftian eldritch horror. It took a ton of water. He drank a good deal, which meant that later he'd throw up in his cage twice, and we need to clean that up too. I got pretty scratched up. When I got him to stand, wash his belly, got some 12 bottles down from the very high ledge with his egregiously, offensively large snout. One of them he got into the standing water, demolished one of the bottle caps. We both smelled like bubblegum then. Frigging bubblegum and some weird, crunchy homeopathic shampoo that smelled like some herbal tincture Quoth might have stolen from a benthy in the name of the wind. But through changes various, says Virgil, through all vicissitudes we made our way. Though then we drained it. Literally came out smelling like roses with a bubblegum aftertaste. And I got out and used one towel to distract him while shouting, Toro, Toro, the other to dry him. He shredded the first towel. He took 3 of my towels and got very, very curious with my pants. But he never bit them. I would have to ride the subway home commando. But the wolf was clean. The wolf was clean. Holy heaven, and the wolf was dry. And this Lancelot was not yet dead. He peed his cage afterwards. Again, we cleaned it up before he got it all over. I walked him a second time, and it was okay. We ate dinner. I read a chapter of an early draft of Bellhammers that made her laugh, though it pained her in her illness. And she went to bed, too, after rhubarb pie and kombucha. Walking back to the subway, Tara and I just started laughing at the stop. Couldn't stop. Our life is absurd, I said. I wouldn't have it any other way, she said. How's my hole? I asked, pointing to the jacket. She giggled and said, fine. Now you can say you got the jacket off a dead guy and that a wolf tried to eat it. She wasn't wrong. All told, it took 7.5 hours, 5 p.m. to 12:30 a.m. The trains were running local. We got to bed at 2 a.m. The boy is dead. The man is born. That was Naked with a Wolf from the Omni Lighthouse. We got a lot of people joining us. FC, Jay, Curtis, Sandalore, Jerry. How's everybody doing? Thanks for chiming in, everyone. Thomas, cool. Here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to drop that link here in the chat so that you guys can see the original if you want. And again, we're here doing a filibuster of the Omni Lighthouse, which is a collection of essays and stories that I've put out over the years in various publications, things of that nature. I'll have some poems from the concrete and watercolor that we did at the New York City Poetry Festival, as well as a lot of other things. We did an essay. How about a story next? Does everyone want a story? Short story? Would that be all right? Let's see here. There's a story I published originally in the New Haven Review. That was many moons ago. New Haven Review is out of the Institute Library of Yale, and they actually have some of the best journal launches that I've seen. I think they're still around. They might not be. It became a chapter in Bellhammers. It was called When Timbers Start. Their book launches are just. They would do like, they get like a quartet and people to read the stories. They would just like fill this library with charcuterie. There'd be so many people. I took the MTA North up to New Haven when we launched this thing. It was so good to meet some of the people that were there. Some of them novelists in their own right. Was that a Emerald City Ghost? Was that a yeah for the story? Was that a yeah for New Haven? Delighted you guys are here. As long as we get Bellhammers is my novel, Jeremiah, right there. So yeah, as long as we keep the viewer count steady or keep increasing, I'm gonna keep going. So if you guys share this around, if you haven't shared it yet, share it around. As long as we keep the viewer count steady or keep going, that's kind of the filibuster thing. Like, what are you filibustering? Is there not enough things in the world right now that need filibustering? Let me ask you this. So as long as we keep steady or keep climbing, I'm going to go until the video cuts or, well, actually, I think if it cuts and we keep climbing, I just might start a new one all over. I'm not sure what the time limit. Someone said it was 4 hours on Substack. I don't know if that's the case or not, but if we're still climbing, people still tuning in, I might just start a new one up and just keep it rolling over. But this is When Timbers Start, again from the Omni Lighthouse, the collection we did. If you scroll up, I think we've got a link to it on the bookshop link, but you can find it on any of my author pages there. Here we go. When Timbers Start, from Bell Hammers, as well as the New Haven Review, as well as the Substack, which, if you haven't subscribed to the Substack, I would appreciate that. Would love to have you guys connected that way. And also, if you're able to recommend it because you have a Substack, that's super helpful long term. When Timbers Start. I like the other one, she said, but it's so heavy, Remy said. I know. I like a sturdy table, she said. Well, there's kitchen tables and there's butcher's blocks. I don't plan on slaughtering a hog in my dining room. I might, she said. I'm the cook. Don't forget. Remy sighed. Do you think it's pretty? I do. Well, you think anyone else will? What do I care for what anyone else thinks? I'm not going to answer that question. You'll get me into trouble, no matter which way I go. Wilson Ramus Broganer, what's that supposed to mean? Well, Wilson Ramus Broganer said nothing to his pregnant wife. Well, in any case, she said, I like it, and I think it matches everything else, so this is what we're getting. All right, now, I didn't mean to make you mad. I'm not mad, I'm decisive. And you won yourself a decisive victory. Okay, now, let's get to the big bag checker. Oh, they don't make bags big enough for a kitchen table, honey. You know what I mean. He hefted the massive slab of wood. You know what I mean, he muttered as he grunted and hefted it over to one of the counters with one of them Sears and Roebuck signs. And they bought it, and with much struggle, they took it home. $5 a month, he kept mumbling as he drove. $5 a month? I could have bought a share of Texaco at the end of the year. Well, then let's take it back. You were listening to me? You weren't really whispering now, were you? I meant to be. You didn't mean very well, he rumped. Well, I'm glad you have your table. Are you? It's just so big. I think it's pretty. And so they went on and on and on until they got home. And he set up the table, and it filled the room as does the king's table in a great hall, except this was no castle, not quite yet. But once he saw it in place, he was pleased enough with it. You're smiling, she said. Well, it's a pretty table set up like that. Well, that's why I made you buy it. I just did a good job setting it up. She did not return the affirmation he afforded her. Well, 2 weeks later, the biggest and baddest tornado any of them carpenters could remember hit. It snapped 200-year-old trees in two. It leveled some houses and frayed some power lines. And when it hit, Remy was at home with Beth. It's a semi-hurricane, Beth screamed. Tornado. We're gonna die. We might, Remy said. Why would you say such a thing? I mean, I'm sure we'll be fine, honey. Let's go get the storm shelter. Well, they went outside, and the wind blew everything. It tore at the trees. Tore at the roof he'd just fixed up. There were boards and water thrown every which way. Beth waddled a bit with her swollen body and the baby inside. And they got to the storm shelter door that Remy had just dug, and they opened it up, and damned if there wasn't 2 feet of water down. That's not a storm shelter, Beth said. Sure it is. Get inside. That's a pool. That's an underground lake like in the movies where the monsters hide. I'm not going down in there. They were all shouting over the wind, mind you, stuff still blowing all around them. You get in there, he said, or I'll get you in there. We're not going back in that house. I know how it's made. You do whatever you want, she said. But me and the baby are going back inside. Well, he watched her go, holding that sheet metal door like he was, and then he groaned and let it slam back down, and he barely heard it over the cry of the train rumbling up high in the sky. He started following her inside, and then he shouted to no one in particular, where in the hell did my brand new lawn chairs go? Well, they've been metal chairs, nice chairs, sturdy chairs. Not a one of them was in the backyard. Back in the house, Beth was pacing slowly, off kilter. What do we do? You vetoed my plan. What do we do? What do we do? The house had been built on concrete blocks. Well, the wind got under there like two stock boys will get under a box, and it lifted the whole house up about 6 inches, and it slammed back down again. Beth screamed. Remy, for once, had nothing to say. What do we do? Well, she was begging now. The house was lifted higher, and it slammed down on those concrete blocks again. Some plaster fell off the ceiling in the other room. The table. Remy went into action. You get under there. It's new, but it's the strongest thing we got. She got under there, moving like a station wagon with two mid-sized wheels, like a wheel with the 10-pound weight on one wall, and then she sat still. And some plaster fell off the ceiling and onto that $5 a month Sears and Roebuck kitchen table. Remy didn't bother to duck under anything but one of the open door frames, leaning against it like some cowboy watching his horse from the door of a saloon. $5 a month! Decent insurance policy, I guess. I don't know. More plaster fell. The house bounced once, twice more. And then the wind died down. And then a sound, like what you'd expect if Chicken Little had been right. And the sky really did fall. Something like the crashing of the Tower of Babel, something like the fall of Troy or the breaching of Atlantis' levee. Finally, all was calm. The hell was that? Remy said. Oh, Remy, do you have to cuss? I only cuss at cursed things, and whatever just happened wasn't no blessing. Is that why you've always been cursing at me? He didn't answer that. He walked outside instead. There, stretched out in his yard, discarded as if some god of greed had found no more fun in a play toy, sat a massive tower, as if the angels had gotten bored with their scaffolding for building the pearly gates and had kicked it over the edge of heaven. Bethy, come look. Come on, come look. It's awful. It's an awesome thing to look at. Well, the neighbor carpenters and their families were outside too, on the front porches, looking at the mangled black thing spread across the yards, the rain still coming down, and none of them caring, not even the prettier ones in their nightgowns, a bit too early. Maybe his neighbor Joe'd been weathering the storm with a little bit of marital duty, how people do cling to one another in hard times, even if it ends up with your neighbor Joe's wife standing half naked in the porch. Well, Beth came out. She looked at Remy. They all looked at one another. And then they all stared at the massive steel oil derrick, long as a water tower is tall. His father had told him about these things, about how they drilled the big old bits and about the saltwater tank at the top. He looked at the top. It had cracked on impact. And the great salt water was bleeding out all over the yards that, along with the rain, was turning the ditches and divots to estuaries. Some of the neighbor kids ran out and played in it. But all Remy could think about was all that salt right on top of their wells. He stared at it, his eyes staring at the eye in the tower. Well, it might as well have been where the poison came out. Beth cried out behind him. He turned, found her clutching her belly and leaking some water of her own. The cramps of early labor scared into her from the crashing and the banging about. He swore. Don't swear, she said. This is a blessing. Not in the rain and the wet. She screamed. Oh, how she cried out from the pain. The neighbor ladies came. Beth went inside with them. And Remy fretted. He occupied himself with the boys, and they went over to the tower to try to stop the bleeding. But the crack widened, rimmed with white. The water just kept on a-coming. Some of the younger men actually tried to put their hands on the thing, which was about like trying to stop Niagara with your shoulder or some stupidity. While they were working over in Joe's yard, they found Remy's white metal table and chairs in a hedgerow, now dirty from all the mud and sewage that had slung about in the wind. New chairs, said Joe. Like hell. Oh, come on, Remy. Finders keepers. Those are nice lawn chairs. Well, in that case, Remy said, I just found this house sitting out over here after the storm. He pointed at Joe's house. Oh, I was only joking. Well, joke these over to my yard, will you? They hauled him. You know, Joe said as they walked back into Remy's yard, I heard they got a name Derek from a hangman in England. Come on now. That's what I heard, because they call cranes derricks, too. Big old towers to hang things from, like a hangman and his noose sticking out over to stick something down into a hole like that. I'll be damned. Derek the hangman, it makes sense, I guess. Well, they never did get the hole plugged. Not with wood and not with clay or plaster or the pig carcass one of the boys tried. Where he got it, nobody asked him. Some things just were. And after several hours of this, the women came back out and they told him he had a son. He ran in to find Beth there, tired and smiling in the middle of more blood than he was comfortable seeing. The blood there reminded him of the full bottle of ketchup he'd watched get accidentally shattered while he was flirting with some girl at a diner as a teenager. Tomato blood scattering all over, but he smiled all the same because he had a son. He named him Tobias. Toby. 3 weeks later, Toby died of pneumonia. It must have been the rain and the wet. That was the year that the Army Corps of Engineers started damming the Kaskaskia River to make Carlisle Lake. Through eminent domain, the government bought out house after house of the townships in the river valleys. They capped 69 oil wells. They exhumed some 600 graves, some of them undoubtedly holding the remains of ancestors of Native Americans, as well as the remains of babies. That's When Timbers Start. And that is a short story originally published in the New Haven Review, became a chapter of Bellhammers, now rehosted in the Omni Lighthouse. Hey, Anja, it's great to have you. Anja is the hardest working beta reader I've ever had, hands down. Just powers through stuff. So thanks for being here. Again, we're doing a filibuster live reading of the Omni Lighthouse, which is a collection of essays and stories that I published, short things elsewhere, or short-ish things. The whole thing ended up not being very short-ish, as said before. Hope that's not peeking out your mic or your speakers, wherever you are. As long as we keep the pace steady of viewer count, or we keep increasing, I will keep on going. We did a story, we did an essay. What do you guys want? You want a poem? You want an academic essay? Or you want something else? Does anyone have any preference, opinion, that sort of thing? It's okay if not. I'll pick something. I might do. I don't write a lot about sports. We got any sports fans in here? Hello, sports fans. This one is like, I think it's like the second or third most popular piece that I've written. I co-wrote it with Isaac Shade or Shadi. I forget how to pronounce his name. I think Jeremiah knows him. He'll be able to. You love to sport. You love to. Okay. The specificity helps, right? He he That's like typing foyer, Jeremiah. It's like saying foyer is pronounced foyer. It's spelled the same way. Shoddy shade. Well, anyway, yeah, he was doing the only sport is physical therapy. Hey, that's no joke. PT is no joke. All right. I have a PT I keep having to go to. It's not shouty. I'm gonna call him Shody from now on. Yeah, PT is no. I've got a physical therapist here in the neighborhood. Incredible, Chung Ying, and they're trying to correct my hips. I've got a tilt in my hip that I've had like my whole life. There's a lot of spinal deformations and stuff like that in my family, and I just can't do it. But it's like the hardest work ever. So I much respect on that front for sure. I used to work an orthopedic floor too, and so I would always tell patients, look, it's not just motion is lotion. It's if you do not do this, you will be like in bad shape otherwise. My grandma didn't listen to me, and so now one of her legs is perfect after her hip replacement, and the other one she walks with a limp because she just didn't. She was like, nah. So PT is no joke. All right, let's do this one. So yeah, Isaac wrote this. He was doing a podcast, I think North Carolina college basketball or baseball or something, or football. I don't know. He was doing some sort of like podcast thing, writing on occasion for Sports Illustrated and some other stuff. And then he just got hired full time by ESPN. I don't know if he'll draft anything with me, but I was trying to figure out a way to write about sports that was like within domains that I cared about. And so I found a bunch of data. Yeah. My respect to you is what that is. Yeah. And what I found was financial data on the Brooklyn Dodgers. So the argument we tried to make was that the Brooklyn Dodgers actually would have been worth more had they stayed in New York City. So I don't know if there's any LA fans out there, but I very much think that I think this is true after what we dug into. So I wish the Dodgers would have stayed here to this day. Well, we'll just get into the argument. Yeah. The Brooklyn Dodgers opportunity cost. And again, this is one of the top posts on there, and it's here in the Omni Lighthouse, which we are reading for a long while, as long as we can. So, in Brooklyn, that'd be awesome. I mean, yeah. We have a significant uh, population in this whole country for sure. So, the Mets have never loyally served Brooklyn as a team, and that's um, Otani. Sorry, the TH. Yeah, did I say it out loud too? Yeah, probably. The Mets have never loyally served Brooklyn as a team. That's particularly poignant with the Dodgers beating the Yankees this World Series. This was a minute ago. So nor will the Mets ever serve Brooklyn. They serve Long Island and Queens, though Brooklyn boasts a landmass almost double Chicago's and a population equal to Chicago's, a city, by the way, with two teams. Brooklyn hasn't had a team since Los Angeles stole the Dodgers. You start to wonder, could the Dodgers have been worth more simply by staying home, at peace with their true fans? Could the Brooklyn Dodgers have been worth more money than the Los Angeles Dodgers? Certainly, it's a question that would interest the likes of Nate Silver, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Lenny Rachitsky. I've never heard that pronounced out loud. Doomberg, Adam Tooze, others of their ilk for various reasons. It's an odd cross-section kind of a question. So before one argues this is ancient, irrelevant history, it was at a recent Yankees game, talking with a lifelong New Yorker, that I realized how devastating losing the Dodgers truly remains in the living memories of those who grew up here in New York City. This particular New Yorker, he said that losing the Dodgers was the hardest part of a tumultuous childhood. It was a fundamental betrayal of his town. Even Forbes has reported on this in the 21st century. It's deep in there, deeper, at least for this person, than the betrayals of his own religious and educational institutions, deeper than family hurts, deeper than getting screwed out of business deals and getting the rug pulled out from under him by a foundation who had given him a grant with strings attached. Someone had stolen his childhood team. Who done it? Who stole the home team for whom and take me out to the ball game? For whom and take me out to the ball game? We're supposed to root. The home team that Rome and their classical prescription of wine and circus thought would help manufacture regional conflict as a sort of pressure release valve on the steam behind popular uprising. This is the very pressure that at critical mass moves the eyes, the populace towards their local and regional problems. Like both sides of the political divide did during the pandemic. Prior to any vox populi or vox populi is the gustus populi and the oculi populi. As go the eyes and taste buds of the people, so goes their voice and feet. These days, this particular ex-Dodgers fan, you seriously think a native Brooklyner would still root for Los Angeles? Hedges himself against betrayal on the order of his home team's magnitude, on the order of someone who stole his local coliseum. Losing the Dodgers was the OG new city, new stadium deal. It's not ancient history. Not only are fans here still bitter because the oldest new stadium deal happened in their living memory, they're bitter because that recent history keeps repeating over and over and over again. Now the St. Louis Rams, now the Raiders. It's a parroted tragedy that tries to proselytize our very American abyss of immense historical oblivion. To be an American is to be the deracinated child of some other land or people or several other lands or people. Our own national identity is quite often a bright, garish, fabulous surface that we spread thinly over forgotten depths. Our national narrative is essentially an idea, never fully realized, of course, but able to keep us borne aloft above an abyss of immense historical oblivion, as a quote from David Bentley Hart. How much more so for American sports fans? Are we like the oak trees that often fail to thrive and the planters of New York City, destined to be torn up by the roots and hope that merely some of us survive transplant? That some tree somewhere grows in Brooklyn? Say what you will of Manchester United Football Club. They were founded 145 years ago in the city that to this day bears their name. There they remain, the ancient Both rope orc tree of soccer. Do we have that in baseball? The Cubs. Beyond the North Siders, the other two oldest teams were founded 20 to 30 years after the Dodgers and Cubs, the Yankees and Red Sox. Of course, as one reader pointed out, oldest teams is what he called a sticky wicket. Here we mean oldest in the sense of one location with consistent branding, but even that can get kind of dicey. The Cincinnati Red Stockings were around since Reconstruction. Some Cincinnati Reds consider that their history, which can be debated. The Atlanta Braves started in Boston and they went to Milwaukee, now Atlanta, and there are still grandfathers in Boston who lament them leaving in the same way that Brooklynites do for the Dodgers. All of that said, the Yankees and Red Sox also happen to have two of the three highest fiscal valuations in all of baseball. Well, they didn't move. Say what you will about AT&T, but perhaps one of the earliest stock tickers in existence, T, has something to do with ranking in the top 12 revenue-generating companies every year. They're still around. Age before beauty and all that, and good, great home teams are old. Some are sure, like some ancient trees, the richest ones might be hollow or dead inside, but on the surface, an entire biome of fandom thrives off the heartwood of the dead. Old teams still get it done, soulful or soulless. And at what cost would you sell your childhood home team to the other coast? Would you sell the Yankees to Seattle? Would you sell the Red Sox to Texas? Would you turn the LA Angels first into a basketball team and then merge the Angels with the New Jersey Devils? Is such a fall from grace worth such a Faustian bargain? At what cost would you sell Brooklyn of Jackie Robinson fame to Los Angeles? $1 billion? $1 trillion? Is there a price? Whatever the answer, we're not asking the city government and franchise owners. We're asking the fans. It's just that some government officials and franchise owners happen to have been fans once upon a time. Do they remember what it means to be a fan for fandom's sake? Do they remember what it was like being a fan when being a fan mattered more than the countless dollars that have allowed them to purchase the teams they now own? Jackie stopped playing for the Brooklyn Dodgers the year my father was born, and 2 years later, they sold to LA. It's interesting because my father died of COVID during the pandemic, at the end of the pandemic, and I dealt with the administrative backlog that one dead pauper fisherman stirs up in its wake. Spoiler alert, it's more mud than a catfish. At what cost of inheritance is it worth losing your childhood father? An unlawful death settlement? A 401k? A house? Is there a price? I'd rather have my father back living and well. Have him back than the 40 hours on the phone trying to convince ComputerShare and E-Trade and Schwab to transfer 3 measly shares of Lowe's into the estate account so that I can liquidate it and cut a couple of $200 checks to my siblings. How many degrading hours, lawyers, haggling dehumanized death certificates and letters of offices does it take? Steve, my dad, died the exact same year. Steve, my dad, his favorite football team, the Oakland Raiders, moved to Las Vegas. I would rather have my father back, the very father who would rather have had his Raiders back. The man was born with the first new stadium, new team deal, and he died with a new stadium, new team deal. Is it the trend that defines it is the trend that defines the boomer generation? World-class products and profits over people. The momentum of that trend is a bear that first dies, then slows, then stops. Both ironically and coincidentally, if it isn't stopped, it will become a bear market trend. What was the true cost of the sale of the Brooklyn Dodgers to Los Angeles? When some business wants to unveil any missed potential gains from having favored one choice over another, they assess the opportunity cost. It's not just what purchasing a stock costs you. It's what purchasing this stock over every other stock you could have purchased cost you. The cost of hindsight when you bought Enron over Amazon. Do cities or the rich citizens do this when they purchase sports teams? If so, what city worries more about money than New York? What sports team garnered more feelings of betrayal than the time the Brooklyn Dodgers moved to LA? Let's run an analysis on the Brooklyn Dodgers' opportunity costs, particularly since the Los Angeles Dodgers are allegedly the second most valuable franchise in the MLB, behind the Yankees, of course, the other non Long Island New York team. Right now, we have to beat the Los Angeles 2023 valuation of $5.24 billion. Can we do it in that magical, happy alternate universe where the Dodgers never left Brooklyn? Could the fiscal opportunity of staying home actually have outweighed the fiscal opportunity of selling out to California? The easiest place to look first is real estate. At the time of writing this, there's a new Jay-Z exhibit here at the main branch of the Brooklyn Public Library where Lance typed this line. The exhibit has, in many ways, made the library less functional for a time, but what it gave up in functionality, it has paid back tenfold in borough pride here and abroad, sort of the opposite of what happened with the sale of Ebbets Field. Not 5 blocks from where I sit, as the starling flies when I write this, stands the marker for the old Ebbets Field, long lost home of the Brooklyn Dodgers. These blocks now have luxury high-rises. They're working on a massive overhaul here in Grand Army Plaza, complete with the restoration of the great limestone slabs that will slate over once slattern cobbles that have dissolved into half-nakedness, clothed ever so sparingly by the creeping wood sorrel, pokeweed, and pigweed. Not only does our library rival Chicago's, it's an area with a museum rivaling Chicago's, the Brooklyn Museum, a botanical garden that rivals St. Louis's, the Brooklyn Botanical Garden, a decent zoo, happens to be my favorite, being a small town kid for whom all zoos are magical oases of safaridom, but my bride is from St. Louis, so for her to compare the Prospect Park Zoo to the Forest Park Zoo is something like comparing a mosque in Dearborn to the one in Mecca. But there's also a 150-acre old-growth wild forest mirroring the Adirondacks, the headwater for its waterfalls, and sylvan eldritch wonders with names like Nethermead. In this arena of Brooklyn, city blocks go for 600 to 800 million. Considering Yankee Stadium covers 4, a simple expansion would have easily put the property value of Ebbets Field in the $1.2 to $3 billion range for property alone. We don't actually have to guess, though, because when everything went down at the time of Smith's death and O'Malley made his appeal to Smith's widow, they started looking at property. He tried to convince the city to condemn what was then known as Times Plaza. He wanted to get them to commission a replacement for Ebbets Field. Who rejected his proposal on the grounds that it would create a wall of traffic, perennial New York villain, and bane of the very rail system after whom the Dodgers derive their name, Robert Moses. Moses argued that a sports arena was an inappropriate use of space. 70 years later, what did New York City do with Times Plaza? We turned it into Atlantic Avenue, Barclays Center, home of the Brooklyn Nets. Now, since Lance, have watched the inaugural game there back in 2014, I think it was, 15, I can easily say that the Nets are a wonderful Brooklyn team. The arena has asked a bunch of independent Brooklyn restaurants to put up a second location inside Barclays. Again, Lance, write this a mere feet from the Jay-Z exhibit as a migrant, though I have a Brooklyn native family. But it's easy to see the value the Nets brought home, although it took a few years. But let's think again about long-term teams here. What is the Plaza worth these days? Total value is $4.9 billion. The center is $1.29 billion in 2021 dollars. The Brooklyn Nets are valued at $3.2 billion. In terms of anticipated future gains, the Brooklyn Nets from 2003 to 2002, or to 2022, had an investment gain of $2.982 billion, ROI of like 1,367% change, annualized ROI of 15.18%. Meanwhile, the LA Dodgers were valued at $4.808 billion by 2021. LA Dodgers of ROI 2002 to 2022, investment gain of $3.6 billion, ROI of 8.36% and 11% on annualized. In terms of future anticipated gains, 4% is a huge disparity where compounded interest is concerned. The Brooklyn Nets return 15% annualized, 1.38 mil, 13 billion, 4 mil because becomes 39 billion. And at the LA Dodgers return, 11% annualized, 1.38 becomes 1 million becomes 1.97 billion. So 4 million becomes 5.7 billion. At the median rate between the Brooklyn Nets and LA Dodgers, it's 13% annualized, 1.38 million becomes 5.18 billion, and 4 million becomes 15 billion. Assuming they stay home and end up in the future side of the Brooklyn Nets, right smack dab in downtown Brooklyn, where all the subways now connect in Park Plaza, in 5 out of 6 models of the hypothetical 2022, Brooklyn Dodgers are worth more than the LA Dodgers, only if we assume the worst case scenario of the purchase price and the worst annual average. Do we end up with a final dollar amount less than the LA Dodgers? To assume the 15% odds at the left lowest end of the bell curve, the least likely scenario on opportunity cost, being worth more in LA rather than staying home, seems a large enough cushion to envelop the new home team bias. Survivor bias, status quo bias, shilling, ageism, observer expectancy, funding bias, implicit bias, all of the above. Whose bias? You LA Dodger fans who desperately want this to be wrong. Why? Because they're your home team now, and you desperately don't want them to move, which again proves us right. In another realm, social media is desperation to preserve a community base, and the equal and opposite disintegration of that community is what Cory Doctorow, as many of you know, famously called enshittification. Here's how a platform dies. First, they're good to their users, and then they abuse their users to make things better for their business customers. And finally, they abuse those business customers to claw back all the value for themselves. Die. Same is true of sports teams. We've dived headlong to the era of fully enshittified sports. First, the team is good to their fans, and the fans build the fame of the team. And then they abuse their fans to make things better for the business customers, the companies that buy ads, that buy ticket blocks, that buy box seats, that buy jets. And finally, they abuse those business customers to claw back value for the franchise itself, and they sell to a new town and die. Sports and shittification. Welcome to the sewer. The water's fine. What's a specific example of this enshittification? Jackie Robinson's last at bat. He struck out to end Game 7 of the World Series, the last World Series, the Brooklyn Dodgers. Brooklyn Dodgers didn't get another shot like the Cubs did, and the Cubs did, and the Cubs did. Meet me in the end notes where I will repeat, and the Cubs did 104 more times. California stole the Dodgers with the help of all the accomplices above, stole, it's quite easy to argue, those 3 World Series from Brooklyn. You owe Brooklyn some trophies, LA. It wasn't that last strikeout that knocked the wind out of Brooklyn. It was that there would never again be a series-winning at-bat, or any World Series at-bat for that matter. And after one final season, no more at-bats at all. And it's not just at-bat stats and trophy wins. Consider the name itself. The name of the Brooklyn Dodgers, as folks know, comes from the trolley Dodgers, those who jumped in front of rails to get to the stadium. If you've ever been to New York City or read A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, you know New Yorkers will do anything in the traffic lanes to beat the crowd and get a couple more minutes with their family at home. They'll jump in front of trains. They'll hold open subway doors. It's not that Los Angeles had no trolleys when they moved. It's just that the same man, Robert Moses, along with the automotive lobby, had started turning all the lines into bus lines in 1955. And by the time 1963 came, there were no more trains in Los Angeles. Translation, nothing to dodge at all. They might as well have changed their name from the Los Angeles 405 and 101 interchange gridlock honkers. That's what Moses did. Sold our hometown subway team out to his idyllic town of gray, cracked concrete and sable SUV small. So we're starting a petition here to change the name to the LA Honkers. Sign your name here. An invasive species, migrating like Canadian geese, crapping all over everything good. Honkers! That's right. We're serious. Sign the petition. We would love nothing more than for 1,000 petitioners to rally around an absolutely ridiculous name change for LA, considering the theft. It's the least we could do. I mean, this is a region who's imported everything from beaches to water because they live in a valley that wants to be a desert, a region experiencing real god-awful drought. This very same desert locale bought out a Minnesota team named the Lakers. Rain dancers may have been more appropriate, or inappropriate, as the case may be. And then again, we live in the world where McDonald's no longer uses beef tallow for their once famous fries, Walmart no longer has walls, Blackstone buys out historically black neighborhoods, and Twitter rebrands as a porn star. One not lead, I let the land of automobiles keep our subway name. Meaningless. Meaningless. Prior to the 2015 World Series, a mutual colleague of ours once said that the Cubs might never win, but that they played in hopes of a sort of apocalypse. An unveiling of the veil of baseball's shadow into truest reality wherein they win again and again and again for diehard fans who have been wandering in the wilderness all those years, who died in hope of the promise, who saw it, who welcomed it from far off, but never themselves set foot upon that final destination, something like faith, that it's a fantasy for the Chicago Bears to win the World Series, but that the Cubs winning the series was true faith because it was logically possible. Will Los Angeles ever give up the Dodgers? Perhaps that's a wrong question, or not the only one to be asked, though it is logically possible and could therefore constitute a true kind of faith, a true kind of hope, though currently unseen. For in a similar way, the Cubs of 2012, perhaps there lies a section of the new heavens, new earth where the original Brooklyn Dodgers play for the original Dodgers fans, game after game after game. At least that seems to be the belief of the writer, The Field of Dreams. Rather different end goal when compared to a field audit, ain't it? It's certainly worth a second petition, that we in Brooklyn get our team. By the time any plans manifest, it will have been as long as the Cubs waited for a World Series. We don't need two teams like Chicago. But since Brooklyn's the same size as, or arguably bigger than that great city, one baseball team would be nice. Just one. Sign here. We stand in that apocalypse. In a world of deracinated children of long-dead sports fans or teams, or even several long-dead sports fans or teams, our sports identities have become the bright, garish fables slathered like sequin paste over the abyss of immense historical sports oblivion. The enshittification of our manufactured regional conflicts. Rome had wine and circus, but our Little Egypt prairies and orchards now lay fallow with incredible Monsanto corn, and our circuses change with the flick of a willow switch. When we shut them down, we have almost no faithfulness left to keep our attention locally. And so we focus on our regional problems, and we take to the streets, take to the capitals, protest nonviolently, and when unheard, as Dr. King once said, even riot. Perhaps this is a rebuke of wine and circus in general, that we shouldn't have them, that we should face and then fix our problems slowly, steadily, that we should elect a woman who is good at running the sewage department for mayor and not a real estate profiteer who criminalizes poverty, clutters our skies with dystopian drone police, and publicly praises himself at every turn, speaking of the last administration. And we should actually solve our injustices, not find entertaining representative figureheads who make them worse. Maybe we shouldn't have wine and circus. Maybe we should face and fix our problems slowly, steadily, and write our regulations in the steady drip of blood rather than the gush of a riot. If sports has any virtue, that's its one silver bullet, that it's allegedly meant to keep the Pax Americana, to release the steam pressure on regional conflict. But we Americans have stroads, where Rome had roads and streets. We have new cities, new stadium deals, whereas multiple coliseums still stand to this day. I hear Rome made their concrete of limestone powder, limestone chunks, and seawater so that it self heals. Ours crumbles in 50 years, and so do our sports teams. We make our concrete that way because it has a higher profit margin, at least in the short term. But the funny thing is, long term, it's actually worth less. And so are our sports teams when they sell to another city. It literally defeats their entire stated civic purpose. And without that proximate good, one that's dubious at best, what the hell are they good for? Bottom line, the short term almighty dollar is worth infinitely more to owners than an army of lifelong fans and the infinite sum game it implies. And that's why the opportunity cost of the Brooklyn Dodgers isn't just that the owners and cities missed out on billions of dollars of revenue, that the Raiders missed out, that the Rams, no. They missed out on the loyalty of the very fans that, when local sports shut down, come face to face with a regional conflict. And after they meditate on it for a while, find themselves left without a chance for reparations. Riot. I'm not a sports fan because I abhor wine and circus. I tend to think sports slap band-aids on injustices. But Isaac is a sports fan. And if the Pax Americana is the main virtue of modern sports, then perhaps faithfulness, not mere loyalty to a person or a place, but a higher loyalty to principle, is the opportunity that our discord lacks. For hope that is seen isn't hope. Who hopes for what he already has? But if we hope for what we do not yet have, we wait for it patiently. That was the Brooklyn Dodgers opportunity cost in the Omni Lighthouse. Hey, everybody. It's good to see you. Charlie, Justin, yo, C. James, what's going on? Shane, thanks for jumping in. As long as the viewer count stays steady or keeps climbing, we will keep going. What we're doing is a kind of marathon reading of this collection, this massive chunk of a compilation of essays and tales. Can you read that upside down and backwards? That is, stuff that I've sold to the World Series edition of Poker Pro. I mean, we read earlier a story that I published in the New Haven Review that I released on Substack. That was a part of my novel Bellhammers. We did an essay. We did kind of a more academic, data journal-y essay there. We did a short story. You guys want a poem? You want a story? What do you want? Does anyone have a preference? I'll pick something if no one's got. It's like, I know, right? Look at that. It's massive. I mean, like, I think we settled on a D12, right? Jeremiah, is that what we settled on? D12 in Dungeons and Dragons. Something like a Morning Star or a mace. I mean, just blunt force damage. It's not piercing damage. Essay, short story, poem. What do we got? Anyone have any preferences? No preferences? Yeah, get it. Anja, get it. You would like this a lot. It's chunky. Hey, here's the thing. Maybe you have too many books right now. Maybe, you're like, my reading list is too big, but my door doesn't stay open. So I've also made a very cheap door stop for you. You can just like prop it open. And once the functionality of your other books runs dry, you can then decide to read it. Yeah, it is. It's short. Yeah. Compared to like the Summa Theologica, it's short. I mean, there's not. Let's do Flying in Concrete. Okay, this is one of the closer poems to Concrete and Watercolor, which is my most recent. I sold out of literally all of my other ones. I would show you guys The Greenwood Poet. I would show you Inconveniences Rightly Considered. I sold out of all of my entire stock at the New York City Poetry Festival. This is literally just my wife's copy of this. So I don't have those. But The Greenwood Poet, I wrote, alliterative meter is called like carving in granite. And so I carved those poems in granites before, during, and after the pandemic. And in Greenwood Cemetery, largest necropolis in the United States, oldest necropolis in the United States. That is to say, a rural cemetery, neo-romantic They started building them Greenwood first during cholera in New York City because the churchyards couldn't hold bodies anymore. And there's Tiffany glass there. There's massive sculptures, and I wrote these poems of like kind of neo-romantic nature poetry in Greenwood. Sold some of those. Others are just self-produced. And then in response to that, I wanted to do more like free verse and metrical verse. So I did concrete and watercolor, which is about the rest of the city, the steel and the concrete and that sort of thing. So I have this overriding metaphor of Greenwood for the trees and fields and rivers, those sorts of things. And then have this overriding metaphor for the poetry of the city, which I think also, it's kind of a Coleridge Wordsworth juxtaposition. I revert to the mean of alliterative poetry in the back of it, but generally it's more metrical, stuff like that. I have a part, if you did not know this, of the alliterative poetry revival on alliteration.net. This guy reached out to me out of the blue. His name's Paul Dean. Let me see if I can find my author thing. Information pieces, authors. I am under S. I still believe. Does anyone else with a last name near the end of the alphabet get stuck at the end of lines when you were in school? Hey, Glenn, thank you so much. Keep writing. We'll see you soon at the writers group and stuff. Great to meet you at the poetry festival. So that's my participation in the alliterative revival. So it's the meter of Beowulf, that sort of thing. And again, as long as we keep the views steady or keep climbing, share this around. If you haven't subscribed to the Substack, I would really appreciate it if you did that, as well as if you're able, if you have a Substack and you don't mind recommending mine, if you've had a good time whatsoever with any of these pieces, I would love it if you could recommend mine. That'll help long term with this. But this is Flying in Concrete, that was in concrete and watercolor. Refers to an old C.D. Wright poem, and originally sold to alliteration.net, which I dropped in there. Imagine flying mid-concrete. C.D. Wright hath said, more or less. New Yorkers have known this daily. We are the people whose petals move as Huron's root is hard waters, as tentacular tubes of motion upon the gray gravel stone walks that have not the healing powers of Roman limestone. It's twice it's coming. Seawater, life, powder, and lift that liquid sunshine will heal whole. We have its cracks, its places to posture our promised dream. We squirm along, squeal alone, squiggle in the sea of iron stones for a splash watercolor. For the rose spray on the capstone with the stark color of a carved maul. Simulacrum suggests something unthought. Gargoyles are still good when tamed and turned into a talisman. You are now free to frolic in puddles and gargle the rain, gray runners. It's Flying in Concrete. It's a poem originally sold to Forgotten Grounded Grain and alliteration.net, part of Concrete and Watercolor. How we doing, everybody? Let's do another story. Shane, what do you think? I don't know how many of you heard the story that I read for Shane that I did for, I almost said Midnight in Paris. The Midnight Vault, file and extension 503. I don't know how many people actually heard that. I might read that. I dropped this into this anthology. File and extension. I did this for TIF 7. Yeah. That's right. Midnight Vault. Yeah. I don't know. One or the other. But again, Omni Lighthouse, you can get it anywhere fine books are sold. And we're going to give this a go. I'm getting hot, and I don't mean good looking. So I'm going to take this shirt off and do that. All right. There we go. Has anyone been to the Rose Parade? I went the first time over New Year's this year. Writer friend lives there. We got to stay at her mom's house before they moved to Boston. And my goodness, I don't think I've ever seen that many flowers. Okay, file and extension. This is dedicated to the owners of the 2014 and 2017 Mazdas in the Seattle area. You know what I need before I do this? I need to actually chug It's a border like a piece. I'm going on an hour and 14. And if I don't if I don't pace myself, this is gonna get dangerous. Chug, chug. Whew. All right, let's give it a go. File an extension. At 12, Hector saw big dollar signs next to the open call for submissions. They were crowdsourcing ideas to solve the invasion. For once, he felt his mind lift beyond their trailer park by the old playground he'd been stuck in for years. For once, he thought he wouldn't let his mama down. Sure, according to the ad and the displayer, it was still an alien invasion, threatening to destroy all life on Earth, even their shitty trailer park laundromat. Sure, it was more money than he'd ever seen in one place. Sure, it would take him refusing to quit until he'd figured it out, which would take probably more time than humanity had, and yet technology had infiltrated every part of his life. There had to be a way for him to solve it. And so Hector messed around with his amateur radio, polychromatic wires splayed every which way amid the burnt plastic smell of winding smoke eddies. His mother said, "These freaking washes. They won't even let us into the app." And Hector, again, 12, said, "I don't get it. Why? We have the hardware. We don't have access to the higher society levels. It's a tiered subscription plan." Hector gasped. "We're washing our clothes? Can you fix it?" His mother asked. And she was always asking him to fix things: computers, machines, pictures, her emotions. It's like she thought he would replace her husband, who'd left them. Kicked out of the mechanical laundromat club because we don't fit in socially in a friggin' trailer park. How, Mom? I don't know. What was it you said about layers? He groaned, having to explain it to his mother once again. Higher tech is predicated on medium tech and only superficially compatible with lower tech. It's a compatibility gap. The layering of culture and technology thicker and thicker in any given era. You can't just plug a supercomputer into an ancient telegraph. Whatever that means, his mother said. He groaned again. You see that poster? It's peeling. How old's the one below it? The one for the taco joint. I was there. It was there when I was a girl. And the cork board? Since Grandma's last day, I don't know, a long time. Well, Hector thought of how to say this, and then he pushed forward. If the cork board rotted, would the poster stay? Of course not. Of course not, he said. It's like that, but with wires and signals. Help me in the meanwhile, she said. He groaned, shouted. He wanted to do it. It was the nagging that bothered him, the way she asked, the emotions behind it. But he looked at her, remembering, and she asked, "Do you still mean what you said the other day when you quoted it, or are you lying too?" He looked at her, really looked. She was actually worried. She didn't know what to do. Could she even survive on her own? Had she ever even tried? "I told you I won't leave you. I won't forsake you. I'll go for where you go, and where you stay, I'll stay. I'll work there, be buried there. Yeah, I meant that. Even if the collectors come with tasers, I won't hand you over to them. You won't let me down on this one?" And she was standing there with sopping clothes in her hands, cold ones. She shivered as they dripped soapy water partly into the bucket. "No, Mom, I won't." Somehow. Well, they resorted to hand washing with washboards they'd gotten from the antique store. He hated scrubbing underwear on tin ridges. It hurt his knuckles. And it took forever, especially with racing stripes, which made him hate admitting he'd never wiped enough. Made him hate the washing machines and the laundromat, the toilets with too many settings. Who needs a washer and dryer and playlist on their heated toilet, especially in a friggin' trailer park? For similar reasons, feeling like the whole basic world had given up on his mother. He'd often looked at those washers plugged into the wall, seething. On a cold night, he could literally see the steam from his teeth like a friggin' cartoon. Whatever the laundry app economy did on a software level, they were still just plugged into the old-fashioned alternating current in the wall. But could you brick the power plant? If you did that, you're back at hand washing anyway. Well, he shook his head, his awkward stage hair locks susurrus against his cheek like willow switches. But it probably used something layered inside, too. In the software, higher tech predicated on lower tech, like you told her. At some point, you had to recharge the battery or the equipment. Was there a similar thing in the code? Deep in the legacy code of the way these things have been written, most code was held together with bubblegum. It wasn't efficient. There had to be some way to break these things. And unfolding again, the big ad in the morning display he'd seen used that idea to break the invasion, right? He wanted to help his planet, so he brought his proverbial stone to the proverbial soup pot of the recently invaded's open call for submissions. 10 washboards still work, even if our soiled world runs out of batteries. Was there a 10 washboard equivalent for an invasion? Way to spike the electricity in the wall and fry the machines. Or if the consequences were identical as they were with the washers, maybe the same question applied. Could he spike the software, the legacy code? Minnie and Maxine. Minnie often introduced herself and Maxine as the nastiest two old toads HR ever sent to run an invasion defense task force. They rolled in on their oversized, differently abled, caster-footed office chairs. How long's it been? Minnie asked. Since interplanetary parliament allocated us an adequate budget for invasion defense, Maxine asked. I was thinking since you got laid, you old toad, but whatever. Years, Maxine said. Wait, which one were you answering? Both happened the same year, Minnie, said Maxine. Where'd all the money go? Minnie asked. Where'd all the sex go? Maxine said. Holding new vassal states, fiefdoms, colonizing new planets, mining space rocks. And the sex? Same place. The Admiral gave up on me, on us, on all of us. You don't think they pad their own pockets? Maxine shrugged. Rob Athens to fund Sparta. Rob Oxford to fund the takeover of India, Virginia, and Australia. Whatever. Maxine picked her old pink glitter manicure. No funds for the invasion defense. Like British shires during World War II. No resources at home. Their whole conversation happened the day the sky filled up with a couple thousand unfamiliar battle cruisers from some unknown species dead set on destroying humanity's homeworld. M&M, formerly employed as, respectively, a superintendent and a middle manager of defense sales, promptly shat bricks. The former superintendent repurposed an idea she'd used at the schools. She had once crowdsourced funds for her school district's building conversion. They modified it to accommodate deep space conflict refugees. She sat up in her chair, which, in desperate need of orthopedic surgery, cried out for pain meds. What about a contest like the one I ran for the Catacomb Treehouse project at the school? Do we have enough cash to pay 10 people for a year? No, maybe 8. We could promise 10 and pay 8. Or we could both quit and have enough for 10. What a cluster. Fusion bomb cost about the same. The defense middle manager snorted, shrugged, and started working on both the official letterhead and the contact list for media, politicians, professors, businessmen, as well as network posts. Of course, it'd kill us all. I don't want to give up, or I want to give up again. Don't. Resilience matters even in poverty. And so M&M started doing what they did best, find cheap help for species-ending problems. Over Hector in his trailer park and over the surrounding lands, the battle cruisers had doubled in number. Streaming said estimates assumed the current count final. The invaders had enough now to dominate the entire planet or detonate it. Great black metallic wedges, their surface structure sprouted like beech bark and the enoki mushrooms. What if the metal had grown from spores in the dark and cold of their Ori planet? That would be cool, Hector said, rocking in his seat, breathing. His mother said, What? Nothing, just thinking. Well, however they'd formed or been designed, these death wedges revealed horrific weapons of writhing shapes. It isn't looking good, his mother said. He kept his mouth shut because he wasn't worried. He wasn't going to quit on her. A sky full of triangular industrial washing machines had come to clean Earth of humanity's racing stripes. Their dinkiest arms made our worst devices of doom look like a toy plastic fire trucks whose sirens had busted and whose batteries had corroded into green, dead coral. Hector was worried about the sky full of washing machines. He was curious and playful. Bad combo for a tween. Or good. In Bellhammer, Illinois, surrounded by pawn beanbag chairs and packages of piss poor yellow mini muffins, Hector opened and saw another display posted on top of the corkboard over the top of the faded Taco Bell advertisement. It advertised that open call for submissions. Any idea leading to destruction of alien invaders and or fleet using only locally sourced hardware or software. Prize. Salary for 10 years, paid in monthly installments. Hector, astonished at the prize and their commitment to local businesses, started messing around with his amateur radio. He ignored his mother's pleas yet again to get in here and do your own damn laundry. He didn't miss Dad much, maybe the idea of what Dad could have been. He missed Dad's money and social access on laundry days, which felt like every other day, as well as the other apps they couldn't access. How had mothers made it on the prairie before machines? It was basically a full-time job running a house, even a small one with 2 people. He first tried view source to see the boot up lines of the alien spacecraft. Pulling those signals out of thin air took more time than he would have liked, and the janky old holograph TV receiver dish spray painted chrome. Well, Hector tried pulling code from those 3 most distinct battlecruiser models hovering over the 3 lakes. Carlisle Lake, what was left of it, Boulder, Illinois, churches and city hall had started again to poke through the shallows, which had radioactive striper bass jumping once they struck the dam's bottom. Rim Lake and its sharp shadows from sharp peninsulas in the setting sun, and what remained of moldy old Forbes. Those lake hovering cruisers he accessed the easiest. Why were they over lakes? Signal disturbance? Fresh water supply? Coolant for the computers? He couldn't read the code. Java had consumed every code by then, like the digital version of some abyssal gigantic Python, not to be confused with Python. Java had hidden everything, and because of this, every code could be translated. He figured he could parse the alien lines with the right translator. After digging through, of all places, an antiquated baseball forum where the data nerds never gave up raging about old rivalries, he found a universal translator. The guy was comparing hitting averages to data bullets, whatever that meant, and then Hector plugged the source code into the translator. Quickly, he realized ships cross-communicated in a kind of collaborative load share in the code. They did this to solve coding problems. They coordinated defense around the jets overhead against their own future shots on the ground. It was a massive interstellar network. All of this left a spray of resilient signals in their wake. Only time would require him to decode it. He simply had to refuse to quit, to refuse to fail his mother. Could he keep going? What else could he do with his time other than blow it? When he realized that the boot up systems worked regardless of model, adapted poorly to older signals and waves, and he leapt off the pinewood log. Having fallen loudly, he squeaked. Worried battle cruisers would have seen or heard him and prepared to fry him. Nope. The cruisers, or space washing machines, kept their unblinking stare and their unwavering hover. If anything, they revealed more railguns and event horizon cannons charged, but not aimed at him, or not specifically anyway, from what he could tell all the way down here with a little more than a set of Dad's old crusty black binoculars and his janky red telescope. The only thing they'd ever really gotten him together as a gift. "How's it going?" Mom asked. "Have you cracked the washers?" He hadn't even tried those. Did that count on? It was like bailing on his mom? Or was working on this project a higher calling, to a higher kind of faithfulness, a higher loyalty? Slowly? Slowly you cracked it? It's going slowly, Mom. Be patient. I'm a kid. The woman sighed an exasperated sigh, as if he hadn't taken out the trash or hadn't refilled the bean cans in the top cabinet. What was this? Just some chore on her honey-do list? Sheesh. But he didn't quit on her, anyway. And so the long slog began. He scrolled through pages and pages of boot-up lines. Nothing emerged. He felt despair. He ate a soy nut hole, furrowed his brow, and said, "Deeper?" He dug into the back end. Had the legacy code been improperly patched? The neon pink cursor blinked over a dark gray field. It was all legacy code in a language made specifically for these ships, barely translatable without the patch he just happened to have downloaded the week prior. It's not like he could jam a plug-in into it and hack into an alien spacecraft. What the heck was this? Cheat like Teen Genius does hack heist? No. No, he needed an elegant solution. Something that didn't require genius or a PhD in some conveniently hyper relevant specialty. Something he could do over and over again, stubbornly refusing to quit until it broke everything. Battering rams did that, given enough time. Dripping water hollows out a stone. Something simple. Beginner's mind. He checked the outputs. Nothing. The inputs excited him. Oddly, these massive machines took in information from so many unexplored parts of the wave spectrum and particle physics, but what it received, whether ion fuel or 9G or radio, didn't really matter unless it somehow processed it oddly. You can't poison a stomach that metabolizes poison. You can't inject a virus into a super immune monster. You can't get bugs to eat a Venus flytrap, not normally anyway, or a bug computer that eats bugs. Computer that eats bugs. He wouldn't figure it out. He might as well give it up. Say goodbye to the world made cruel by space invaders. Peace out, 10 years' wages. Hello, washboard scrubbing. His options, kind of up a creek. He wouldn't be hacking in by altering code. He couldn't break the booting code screen or change the hardware with software, not much anyway. Could anyone change hardware with software outside of the occasional overheating schemes that might fry our hard drive? He'd heard of that one nasty bit of code that exploited a 40-day systemic flaws to create a small inefficiencies in a nuclear reactor over years until it melted down. Was there something here like that? Now, who is he kidding? For that to work, he'd have to know enough about the ins and outs of the actual code language for him to find a deep, complicated exploit. He wasn't a coding master. Clearly, the best minds hadn't cracked it enough to do much of anything. He could try to poison it with inputs or go back to playing Paperboy on his emulator. Better than Playboy anyway, but it was quitting, even still. He always threw open those papers through the windows in Paperboy. He wanted to throw the freaking displayer on the corkboard that had shown in the original ad out the window. He wasn't that great at figuring it out. He was 12. 12! However obsessive and myopic, however curious, however playful, what the hell can a 12-year-old boy do, really? If he didn't actually figure it out, he'd have nothing to show for it. At least with Paperboy, he could get a friggin' high score. He might not solve the problem anyway, so he'd be in the same place he'd been in when he found the open call. Best ignore it and game his life away. And Mom was so poor. Then again, if he did figure it out, in the other room, his mother wept on the phone with the food stamp office. Is there any way to file an extension? She begged. There were deadlines for food stamps? He hated the adult world. With all of this, he was beginning to realize that he had to care about the future, and the dread of that, the worry and anger of that, was showing him that childhood neared its true, permanent end. He gave up for a while. Went to the laundromat to sit on the dryers, hoping that they might shake something loose. Their white-coated metal called to him, vibrating. He proffered no ideas. Nothing in the place or outside the place did. He couldn't even use the damn machines because he couldn't afford the app economy. It enraged him enough to sweat on his teeth and knuckles. Why did businessmen have to be so friggin' mean? Couldn't they see it's actually more profitable long-term to not populate your company with so many desperate folks? To make sure they're not making your food while sick or dying faster than the next company's employees, or motivated to leave bad management rather than follow their own ideas and calling? Wouldn't happy laundromat customers be more likely to stick around? He'd given up on the one chore his mother had asked for, the washing machines. Yeah, he couldn't boot up to the spaceships, and maybe he could boot up to the washing machine and brick those. Oddly, when he looked at the source code, Hector found out the same situation in the laundromat's washing machines that he found inside the battle cruisers. Legacy code. Boot up lines. Nothing stuck out other than that connection. But it was a very, very strange connection. A washer connected to a social app. A battle cruiser fleet imposing itself upon all of society. Meanwhile, his mother was shrieking to file an extension just to get the eggs. Friggin' eggs! Can I file an extension, please? What's stop? File. Extension. He went back to the inputs on the washing machine code. The washers ran their file reader not off of file headers, but off of file extensions. Maybe it made more sense in an alien language, maybe not, but could it still create problems with old signals, old file types, translating something it wasn't built to read, like a GIF? Any old file sent the normal way would end GIF in the file extension, and not if you used headers. But his amateur HD radio broadcast would work perfectly because it didn't add extensions to files. It used headers. Why not try it here? He sent the extensionless GIF right into the heads-up display of the over-engineered washing machine. It worked. The entire row of washers bricked endless loops, boot loops, blue screens of death because they tried to read the file extensions which didn't exist, bouncing off the headers to read the file type. He then went and bricked the rest of them, including the one at the end supporting the second-hand disco lamp. Bricked it clean. He hadn't quit on her after all, even though he was just a little boy. Mom? In the dawn, mutant backyard boars, crowing like prehistoric roosters. Hector searched through the readout of the ship's code to find its process for booting, running, plugins, inputs. He seriously doubted he'd catch one of the battle cruisers in shutdown mode. They'd probably nosedive out of the sky in that case. He scrolled for hours. He found nothing out of the ordinary until he came to methods for reading files. There it was again. A universal translator for incoming signals to find the file extension. Glorious! He'd bricked the entire laundromat's sociological apps to let his mother clean his damned clothes, but this was real motivation. This 10-year salary, this humanity ending fleet. It seemed old to him, almost impossibly old, impossibly strange, the connection. Who would have thought this way within the national security sectors unless someone there had grown up poor enough to be restricted access to a friggin' washer? Yes, the cruisers ran their file reader not off of file headers, but off of file extensions too. Well, maybe it made more sense in the alien language, but still, it could be problematic in the same way it had been for the washing machines. Such a simple, stupid find. Utterly inane. And yet, he rigged up his HD radio and tried it. White hits 100.1 FM, WJBD, he announced over the old broadcast pirate radio. With a couple of turns, a couple of dials, a couple of pushes, lock slider. Hector amplified the signal with a full month's budget of battery stored electricity. If this failed, they'd be damn near powerless for a month. That would crush his already overworked, overstressed mother. But he did it anyway, hoping, praying, an absurd risk. But poor and desperate people have always been taking absurd, desperate risks in order to have a chance to get out of it. Then Hector let the GIF rip through the signal extensionless, headers only. When the star cruisers received the signal, their computers tried to read the extensionless GIF. They failed. The navigation screens died from luminescent blue to dead black and stuck on an endless loop of Bellhammer, Illinois' Light Hits 100.1 FM WJBD pirate radio. The infotainment display in the battlecruisers tried to reboot, and then they hit the extension, or at least where the extension for the GIF should have gone to tell the ships exactly what kind of file it had received, therefore how to read it. When the first cruiser didn't comprehend, it amplified the file and broadcasted it out to their collaborative network to see if a nearby ship in the alt hive mind could translate. That ship, too, began the process of crashing and rebooting, and the loop continued so that the system never fully finished the reboot task. Alien engineers desperately tried to diagnose the problem, intercepted communications when later translated read something like, "Remove it from my head, I beg, remove it from my head, I beg. It's as well virally affecting my mind as ships. We cannot give you up." The first battle cruiser took a nosedive towards Carlisle. "We cannot give you up." The readout, connectivity master unit fried. And when he read the readout, Hector shouted, "Ha! Fried! Bricked! Hector, come outside. What's happening? They're crashing." "Same as the washers, Mom." "What?" How'd a tween do that? Using a busted old HD radio wave to send a GIF without the file extension. You did this for real? I bricked a Star Cruiser. Not just one, his mom said. And as the loop rebroadcasted for help over and over again, it spread to all 2,344 cruisers, each a couple of square miles inside, so that their black hulls slowly rained down on the earth and crushed under their own weight. Some of the wedge metal forms melded with cityscapes, others caused tidal waves, still others flattened towns, and even still, the entire fleet of washing machine-looking wedges crashed. And Hector smiled, and he said, "Clean." "Thanks for sticking with me," his mother said. Was she crying? "Hire him," Maxine said. "It'll be cheaper than the prize." "What was the GIF?" Minnie, the superintendent, asked. Maxine, the defense middle manager, said, "Source is an animation of some ancient music video. The museum has a video on a looping display. How's the song go? Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna run around and hurt you." All right, that was file and extension. How we doing, everybody? We good? John, thanks for joining. We are on a filibuster read, the Omni Lighthouse, and enjoying ourselves thoroughly. This is a compilation of the various stories and essays that I've published over the years. The New Haven Review piece was read earlier, the Brooklyn Dodgers Opportunity Cost. There's one in Poker Pro, there's others in the Poets Market, so on, so forth. I didn't include the piece, "Do Literary Books Sell Fewer copies than genre books on an average units per title basis," just because it's pretty self-contained and it's already in a print form. So if you want to know that, you're going to have to buy that separately. That is not in the volume. But what are we thinking, friends? We thinking a story? We thinking an essay? What sounds good to everyone? I see you, Martin. I see you joined in here. I see that, Shane. Let's see. Yeah, your story was great. Let's see. I didn't know you had both volumes there, Anjan. That's great. So okay that you had to go back to work. I totally get it. As long as we stay steady or keep increasing, we're gonna keep going, I think. We'll see. We'll see if it breaks me or not. But yeah, anyone prefer a story or an essay or academic piece or a poem? What do we think? Connor wants a poem, and you like Connor. Let me see. Did Connor say that earlier? CJ. Oh, poem. I see. Okay. Maybe. Thanks for the chat. Let's see. What else is in here? I didn't put gobs and gobs of poems in it because this is here. So if there's not one in there, I'll read from the other one. He's Mr. Desmond. What does that mean? What does Mr. Desmond mean, Connor? Vinny, what's going on, man? It's good to see you. Thanks for joining. How about this? I've got a poem that I published in the article that I sold to the Poems Market entitled "What is a Poem or How to Think About Reading and Writing Poetry." C. James Dead. Oh, gotcha. Mr. Desmond. Oh, I see what you're saying. Up to C. James Desmond. I see. Yeah. He was not on the screen, and so it didn't click. So yeah, so we'll do this piece on what is a poem, how to think about writing and reading poetry. I think what is a poem. Also kind of high on the most shared list. That is in the volume, the Omni Lighthouse. Again, as long as we keep it steady or keep growing it, I think I'm going to keep going. So if you see the picture of me at the start of that piece. I don't know if it allows you to click on the live chat to click out, but you might have to like copy and paste it if you're on computer. But that photo of me is me in the Cafe Greco in Rome. The one time I went to Rome, where like Wagner and Lord Byron and Keats and Shelley wrote poems. So that's me with my hair much, much shorter and a rose that had been given to us on the street from a random person in my ear. It's the most ridiculous poetry photo I think I've ever taken. But Tara insisted. So I don't know what paintings are on the back of the wall there too, but it's pretty great. Anyway, et cetera, et cetera. What is a poem or how to think about writing and reading poetry? I sold this to the 2016 Poets Market, and I was delighted to meet the people from Writers Digest, with whom I have placed several things over the years. Again, if you haven't subscribed to the Substack, I would really appreciate it if you did that. If you have a Substack yourself, if you wouldn't mind adding me to your recommended Substacks, that'll help grow these things over the years. And if you're able to share this specific video, go ahead and do that. As long as we keep it steady and keep growing, I think I'm going to be able to do it. Might have to pause to go to the bathroom, but we will see how that goes. Camera's at 49%. Okay, looks like we're doing good so far. Okay, settings, great. Okay, all good. Where's the chat? What is a poem? How to think about writing and reading poetry. As a young man, and no bathroom breaks, Vinny, I left my catheter packed up. That was a joke. I don't have like a Rolling Rock bottle down here that I can use, man. Like, what do you want me to do? No bathroom breaks? All right. I should have done less diuretics with the coffee here. All right. As a young man, I complained I didn't get poetry. Can I get a witness for that? Anyone ever complain about that, or hate poetry, or don't like poetry, or prefer everything to poetry? As a young man, I complained I didn't get poetry. The poetry world seemed broken in two: those who rhymed, those who did not. Rhymers chose their path either out of too much intelligence, ignorance. All I know is roses are red, violets are blue, or too much intelligence. Poema means formed thing in Greek, therefore abide by the forms. Non-rhymers reacted against them, but did so without a compass, writing anything and everything as long as it didn't look, sound, or taste like a poem. Let's beg the question. Were some free verse poem even poems? I've come to enjoy all kinds of poems, but this canyon separating poets scares many would-be poets. Some novices stumble upon rhyming poems, something they can see and hear and wonder, is poetry about good sounds? Other novices hear free-form poems that focus on metaphor, and they wonder, is poetry only about metaphor? I suppose the answer to both is yes. We'll start with free verse poets who make fun of the roses are red crowd. They do have a point. John Milton even made the same critique as those poets, but Milton made it against his contemporary English poets in 1667. He did so at the start of Paradise Lost. Milton said, most poets use rhyme to set off wretched matter and lame meter, and that some of the best English poems exclude the jingling sound of like endings. Like Kendrick, Milton could throw shade, though Milton would have thrown shade at both Kendrick and Drake for focusing only on rhyme. However, Milton's deeper point is something Kendrick seems to understand very well. If we must rhyme, we must consider our rhymes last. C.S. Lewis, in his foreword to Paradise Lost, said, every poem can be considered in two ways, as what the poet has to say, and as a thing which he makes. From one point of view, it's an expression of opinions and emotions, and from the other, it's an organization of words which exists to produce a particular kind of patterned experience in the readers. Your opinions and emotions form your poem's soul. What critics parse apart, but its patterns incarnate your opinions and emotions by giving your reader an experience, a thrill, a chill in the spine. Blend that up with Milton's thoughts, and you'll discover a schematic for any poem you ever want to write or understand. Your opinion is matter. Your emotion is metaphor. Patterned experience is metered phonoaesthetics that sometimes rhyme. or perhaps show how rhyme is more than just hop on pop. Some will disagree with my list. Before you do, consider this. One, without good subject matter, your poem means nothing. Two, without good metaphor to emulate matter, your poem isn't poetry. Three, without some sort of meter, even purposeful arrhythmia, the poetic experience holds no shock, no rapture, no art. And four, specific rhyming phonoaesthetics, the art of sounds, follows the rest like this bright caboose. Matter. It's the most restricted element of any poem, the size of your canvas. Solid matter, the reader knows what we're talking about this and not about that. Genre is a part of this, but so is opinion. For instance, some comedy writing schools teach students to pick a subject and pair it with a personal angle, an angle on a subject. Hopeful, divorce. Despairing, cheese. Devious, waterfall. Basically, they teach this launch pad so that comedians can quickly arrive at opinion expressed. Without a subject, you're a potter without clay. Even if you write about non-entity, nihilism, or antimatter, those still count as poetic subject matter, and frankly, even philosophically, depend upon existence. But that's another conversation with Bulgakov for another day. The Psalms of Scripture transcend more languages than any other book of poems by being the poetry of ideas. They don't require metrical sounds to work. They only play with matter and metaphor, comparing and contrasting them, or emphasizing them with epizeuxis. That means repetition. Triple epizeuxis is like holy, 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 Jerusalem, 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 that kind of thing. Also, to critique myself here, it's not always true that they never use sounds, but it is certainly the poetry of ideas. Start somewhere other than subject matter, and your poem's more than meaningless. It's uninspired, and the breath kicked clean out of it. Without it, what you write doesn't matter. 2, metaphor. Poetry, as a vessel for birthing and begetting language, draws virility from metaphor. Good matter, illuminated by new metaphor, is poetry. Nothing else is essential. From Hebrew parallelism to modern free verse, dozens of forms rely on little more than matter and metaphor. Free verse poems that fail because they're either about nothing or about nothing interesting. Metaphor is the second bit. I don't know if you guys can hear the horn, but they're saying hello outside on the street. We might use the phrase figures of speech or personification, but it's the figure, the person, the birth of the new name noun or stringing together verb that we're after. An erudite and accomplished poet went back and forth with me over email on this point, and I would like to rehearse some of that debate here in the footnotes with his name redacted, but arguments preserved. Why? Because I think it might both clarify my point and show others another way of saying all of the above. Again, I sold the original a decade ago, so I'm finessing it for 2025. Lancelot is no surprise to me. But he said, a poem is a piece of literature, written or oral, that is structured according to some sort of rhythmic principle and sound pattern. And argued that rhythm is essential, with many examples, some of which were new to me, I didn't know, having not studied Hebrew prolifically, though able to read it, that many psalms were also based on meter, though I still think it's primarily a matter and metaphor poem. He would say that if it hasn't got rhythm, it isn't a poem. Rhythm is the main thing. It seems to me that free verse poems are metrical on a line-by-line basis, so it's less about the meter of the piece and more about the disparate interactions of different meters. If you ask me, that fits the tone and tenor of the chiaroscuro, can't pronounce that right, world events of the 20th century. Other free verse poems are not metrical, but are certainly still poems. And not all of Mary Oliver is metrical, but I defy anyone to make a sensible argument for how Mary Oliver was not a poet of the highest caliber. I often think of C.D. Wright's line, imagine flying in concrete. It's almost a Buddhist koan, but it denies work to, I think, poetry. And hers are all prose poems with almost no meter to speak of. But so many of her lines resonate so deeply with me, and they are not prose after all. Can you find a poem without a metaphor? I don't think so, because it's using language, and language is metaphor. In other words, I'm making a trivium argument, logic embedded in grammar through the rhetoric meter. And what I mean by metaphor is a word that carries across meaning from one phenomenon to another. The metatrope is personification. And all the personifications, various contraries, reification, apostrophe, sermonitio, etc. I think it's impossible to find a poem without this. I mean, I was alliterating in the original piece, matter, metaphor, meter. But if we're asking by metaphor, I mean merely instances of, for instance, the moon was cheese. The answer is not merely metaphor because that doesn't include all figuration, all prosopopia. The making and unmaking of faces is what I'm after, a la Paxton's Poetics of Personification out of Cambridge. I get that somewhere up here. Yeah. Here we go. We're gonna cite. We're gonna pull it off, man. I've used that also in the Economy of Stories in the Name of the Wind. James Paxton, great piece. Figuration and disfiguration, personification, dispersonification makes up the life cycle of any given word. Poetry is the means by which new words are born. And that's why the word noun means first and foremost name, as in true name. The making of names is poetry. And the ending of persons behind those names is academic abstraction. Words are born from extraction by poetry, and they return to abstraction. One of the big reasons our culture is suffering right now is because we're quite good at killing new words and diluting our rhetoric, but rather bad at birthing new words. So use figure of speech if you like, but pay attention to that word figure or personification. But pay attention to the person part. It's the act of carrying through from one meaning to another new one, of birthing a new person, a new noun, and therefore a new name, a new binding or stringing together. Verb, verbe, verbum, chrema, ero, for reference. And I cited the Economy of Stories. Two examples of my interlocutor used were these. An epicure dining at Crewe found a lather large mouse in his stew, cried the raider, "Don't shout and wave it about, or the rest will be wanting one too." Is there a metaphor in there? How about this? There was a young girl called Renee who had nothing pleasant to say. So her mother got mad and said she was bad and made her sit in the corner all day. The first limerick, the figure, were I to give him a name, is the figure would be mouse stew jealousy. It's a phrase I never thought I'd utter, but it's why comedy works too, which is kind of poetry. Another topic entirely, but finding the funny is the same process of configuration. When life gives you melons, you might be dyslexic, reconfigures melons to mean lemons through the sort of poetic imposition of dyslexia at the last possible moment, marking a sort of happy boundary violation of language so that we laugh as much at ourselves as anything for the shared contrast, recontextualize. It also happens to have a clear meter. Da 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 da. In the second limerick, the name Renee is a French form of Rene for Renatus, a Latin name that literally means born again. Here I can easily read that the second as a metatrope of either penance or hypocrisy. I would easily title that poem Renatus. Surely a metaphor in that sense. Does this mean it can't happen in prose? Well, as admitted above, novelists often do slip into poetry, both formally and informally. So of course it can, insofar as a narrative includes a poem within it or moves into a poetic register. But that subsuming doesn't preclude the definition I'm offering. I don't wager any more than the definition of a rectangle precludes the definition of a square. In fact, rectangles often subsume squares, right, depending on the square in question. This is where the square rectangle metaphor breaks down. I would argue a new configuration of language is unique to poetry, whereas it's not necessarily for prose, which often resorts to cliche and reification. I chose configuration carefully etymologically. The more I think about this, the more I think I would simply ask, what distinguishes poetry from the set of vocal music containing scat, beatboxing, filana, there's several words I can't pronounce here. Poetibul, I'm not French, sorry. Follow-ups. What distinguishes poetry from music? What distinguishes poetry from song? What distinguishes song from poetry? And music from song? I think these questions in the Gramus semiotic square show us how I think matter and figure distinguish poetry. And at that point, I would appeal to C.S. Lewis's argument against E.M.W. Tilliard in The Personal Heresy that a poem isn't just about rhythm, nor about the poet, but about what the poet is looking at. That's a discerning moment of something they saw. In other words, a new name for an old an old thing, the birth of nouns and of verbs, so that mixed metaphor is metaphor. Granted, some whip up bad mixes, which gave rise to the rule for prose about mixing metaphors. The best illustration I have for a good mixed metaphor is in a poem that I wrote titled Silt. And again, I published this poem, Silt, several places, but also in this edition of the Poets Market. They, Germanic tribes, had this word broca, meaning marsh. Sounds like mocha. I've wondered whether brauchen, to use, like digest, is related to bruch. Our world's stomach acid eats soil away from stones. Anxiety beats us, erodes, or uses us well. How the brook deltas marshlands close. Old Englishmen came to use broch, stream, in a marsh, so new words arose. The poet tramps through the marsh, then home to help his missus cook a meal, drops a plate down on a stone, where shattered reminds him of broch. He points, says broch, writes his village sites, then citation stops, revises its source. Broke. A word is born. Two words, one head, then mouth, one spank, then follows sound, one life-giving muse, one ruin. Brook, marshes veins. Broke, penniless, pain. We come to now, to towns how named, races split or regenerated. We ask our borough, what is this? What's this? Which will you be today, dear Brooklyn? As all phrases are metaphors at heart, a modern metaphor like broken barn depends on two Old English metaphors. The first, called a shattered plate broch, as in brook like, and the second meant barley house. So, so in that brook like barley house were born calves, is a fair line of alliterative meter. Language is metaphor in the end, and this is a basic tenet in semiotics, the symbolism of language, what Noam Chomsky calls our massive evolutionary leap. In Narnia, Aslan makes a distinction between animals and animals by giving one set language. A normal horse knows grass is grass, and a Narnian horse says to a badger that grass reminds her of fur. As Bulgakov would say, personal consciousness of self is proper to the nature of spirit. Language compares one thing to another so that the speaker can build a relationship with the hearer, and so the speaker can express self and have self reflected back in an act of linguistic communion. Here, this is me. You may now experience me. Now, every sentence in a given language mixes metaphors, words, but poetry invents new mixtures. The better the mix, the better the poem. In the case of the broken barn, this particular mix of metaphors has become cliche or common language, so we could reverse the river of etymology to create something new. Brook through the barley house is whiskey rafts of grain in place of broken barn. If I have deferred this new metaphor to subject matter about losing my family's farm, I could be on the right track. Meter. Submit whatever form, rhythm, or arrhythmia you hope for your poem or metaphor. Once you have, then think through the form. You may have decided it ahead of time. I'm going to write a sonnet. Luckily, after time, many of these meters will be internalized, but prior to that, you will need to make sure your metaphors are clear before choosing a form. Ideally, all four happen at once, as the act of both reading and writing a poem is always already all of the categories at once. You cannot, in the highest act of composition or consumption of poetry, parse out these four matter, meter, metaphor, phonoaesthetics. You encounter metaphor and its subject matter, and for a dollar and for a dime, is inseparable for first blush, though we may abstractly separate its components later. But we're writing primarily to folks who want to understand the nature of a poem, as well as those who are trying to find a gateway drug into the craft. For now, with your subject matter and metaphor in mind, find a place that fits the opinion and emotion behind your budding work. Taste the difference between iambic and trochaic. Analyze the meter and seemingly meterless pieces like Ashbery's Litany or Lee's Porcine Canticles. Pause. Do you guys know about the Porcine Canticles? Because you guys should definitely read the Porcine Canticles. It is written by a man who was a scholar in the feminine endings of Milton. Okay, like the most boring thing you could get. And very busy, being a PhD, I think either Utah or Idaho. I always say Idaho. I think Utah. And his wife saw him just shrinking. He wanted to be the next Milton. Got super academic about it. Just kept writing Miltonian, like, analyses and stuff like that. And his wife pulls up one time in the midst of this, seeing him just like wither away with a big like a rucksack, like a burlap sack writhing in the back of her trunk. And he's like, Jane, what is this? And he goes back and looks, and it's full of piglets, little baby pigs. And he's like, what are you doing? And she knew he grew up as a pig farmer, and his next door neighbor, John, was a pig farmer who's just a hillbilly, doesn't care about poetry, doesn't care about literature, doesn't read books, like that wants nothing to do with that, just living out his life in the country as a pig farmer. And he starts pig farming next to John, and immediately the Porcine Canticles are born because he starts putting down the regional dialect free verse form of his neighbor John. It's hilarious. I did a full reading of one of them with the Grandmaster of Speculative Poetry, Linda Addison, on YouTube a long time ago. We were trading poems back and forth, and I just read one of David Lee's Porcine Canticles. But anyway, you can buy a copy of the Book of Forms, which I have up here. It's Louis Turco, Book of Forms, Handbook of Poetics. Hey, Victor Nolan, and is it Graham or Graham? I'm not sure. So the Book of Forms will help you write a poem in any style, or if you prefer a more direct and less thorough route, browse through Wikipedia's category for poetic forms and make an attempt at the same meter, same metaphor in every form, and then pick an appropriate or glaringly inappropriate form for your work in progress, and stick to it. Pick a form and stick with it. If you start to use sounds, rhyme or otherwise, that limit your form, don't let those. Discipline them like children in the sense of teach. Gently help your poem understand the nature of the poem you're writing. Pace limits sound, and sounds don't have to limit pace, and break those sounds into crags of your patterns and meter. Let those crags stand on the bedrock of your metaphors. Let that bedrock hide the volcanic core of your subject matter. This solidifies all the poetry into a patterned experience, historical moments we call art, phonoaesthetics. And I then, quote a lot of different poetic types that I'm not going to just run through the list because it's there in the text. If you want it, it's in here. Okay. But we're not going to do that. I'm going to hit pause on that one because it goes on for a minute and there's a lot there. But I move into kind of Chesterton's argument of like, why would we ever write poetry? And like the difference between art and advertisement and what art made for virtue is like. And so I think that, if you want the rest of that, again, get the Omni Lighthouse. How are we doing, everybody? We are doing a filibuster reading. I'm at 2 hours here. Vinny, are you serious? No bathroom breaks? When's this rule? I don't remember drafting this rule. What's the vote? I need to take that to a council vote, which is a dangerous thing to do because I think it'd be more of a crowd pleaser if I pee my pants live. Yeah. Let me know how you guys feel about that. What do we want next? Do we want a story? Do we want a poem? I know I kind of did both an article and a poem that way. I could do a personal essay again, or an academic essay. If we have no preference, I will choose willy-nilly. No preferences here. Okay. If I don't hear back from Vinny, I'm totally taking a bathroom break. I'm just letting y'all know that right now. I wasn't doing this congressionally. What if I read the titular story of the Omni Lighthouse? Anyone into that? Think so? Yeah. Again, if you haven't subscribed to the Substack, please do that. If you are able, if you have a Substack and you're able to recommend mine, that would help me a lot long term. As long as we keep the viewer count steady or increase, it looks like we're doing that. I will keep going. Um, I will keep it going. All right, here we go. Omni Lighthouse. All right, I didn't hear back from Vinny. I'm totally going to go take a bathroom break. I will make it super, super fast, unless he's going to say no. Should always listen to Vinny. I just, that you were rooting me on to pee my pants, uh, has has me concerned. Uh, yeah. I'm totally gonna take a bathroom break. Real quick. One sec. I need questions about these paintings in the background when I come back. Okay. What are the paintings in the background? Hey, come on. Hey, JD. So that is my dad did that when he was in high school at an I need questions about these paintings in the background when I get back. And Andres just asked the yes, that's hand painted. Sometime I'll pull it off, but my late father painted that for a Yes concert. Is there a way to flip video? There's got to be a way, right? Um, for one of the original Yes concerts, he painted that. And when he passed away, Tara said she wanted that because she was already looking for one. She was trying to say yes and to me more often. So is that these were painted by a Ukrainian man here in town, hand sketched. And that one is Betty White, done by my sister, who is on Substack as Betty Lou Thelma Lynn. Funny story behind that. Um, when, when my dad was doing the baby dedications for like the most white bread preacher growing up, um, he held me up and when I was an infant. And this preacher said, "Well, Steve, what are you going to name this boy?" And Dad said, "This Bubbly Roy, he going to play football." And the guy was just starting, and he like didn't give him my real name for a very, very long time. And then 2 years later, my brother came along, and he said, "Well, what are you going to name this boy, Steve?" And he said, "This Billy Joe Jim Bob, he going to play football." And like he was some hillbilly. And then my sister came along and he said, "Well, you've got a girl now, and I know football's not allowed. And I know that was fun the last two times." This is like 10 years later. So the level of which my family will not let a joke die. And holds my baby sister up and he says, "This is Betty Lou Thelma Lynn. She going to play football." And again, didn't tell the guy her real name for like 2 years. And so I think my sister is Betty Lou Thelma Lynn on Substack, but she, she's lives in a big city now, whatever, but she goes by that. But that is a Betty White painting she did. Betty White wrote my sister back right before she died. Uh, we like doing obscure outreach to celebrities and whatnot. Omni Lighthouse, the titular story of this anthology of essays and stories. Um, Again, if you guys don't know, a lot of my stories are interconnected two things. So my story here in Of Gods and Globes 3, which I edited, the one in there with Alexander Shirkman, my story in Of Gods and Globes 1, which I also edited the volume 2 with, the late Howard Andrew Jones is in there, Juliette Marillier is in there, uh, World Fantasy guest of honor Karen Foran is in there, et cetera, et cetera. And, Tap and Die, Overmorrow when it came out, that like a literary, and even Cold Brood, which I don't know if you guys know about it. It is it's a film noir photo novel. Actually, that photo right there won the much bigger printed version of it, oldest photography competition in the world. Photo Swival was judged that year by a curator from the Chicago Museum of Modern Photography. So all of this stuff is interconnected, and so based on where it is at in the timeline, that includes the Omni Lighthouse. Um, oh, sorry, the Netherlands shipping. Yeah, that's tricky, but I'm glad you're gonna get it. Okay, Omni Lighthouse, which by the way, the Netherlands represents on Substack. You guys come in strong. Like there is not an insignificant number of you. Um, okay, great. The Omni Lighthouse. Um, yeah, and treat this like a AMA to, if you guys have any questions for me about whatever, I will answer it. I reserve the right to make things up. But the Omni Lighthouse. In the lighthouse nook, she had built her great pillow fort, and from there she could see the Big Wreck's treasures. The lighthouse had lain derelict before she'd arrived. All surface travel, like boats and planes, had grown costly and redundant after those silly reusable rockets. But for the smallest vessels fashioned for hobbyists and the rich, not even refugees use piddly boats anymore. Why do that when you could ride a giant space bus, a space 18-wheeler, and without those piddly vessels, who needed an automated lighthouse for rockets? Well, she'd heard most floating planes stayed up in archipelagos to navigate the smaller islets. Yet the great storms made it harder for vessels with no more than radar and satellites to guide them. The first crash helped her to see the real need, the big wreck. The sound alone, so much friction welded stainless steel punching the stone crags, the sand it had thrown into the air, her ears still rang with it, and she felt like puking first. The racing heart came later. Even the racing mind and drippy palms beat its beats. Should she approach the crash site to see what treasures it contained, or keep tucked in her cozy tower in case more crashed? She'd come here in the wake of the bad, what had happened to Mom. Few places on the island had stuck out so vibrantly in her memory as this one had, but before the bad, Mom had taken so little time off for them both to get away from their own museum. So few vacation spots, and so dangerous to travel very far from the river had. The lighthouse. The lighthouse she remembered when the bad had happened to Ma. So she had come from her and her mom's Riverhead Museum, what with its rusty train cars and mysterious machinery and other junk, to this other museum of broken down stone and dying light. She wondered if she could carry the fire further. Few museums stayed open after the mass exodus. Most closed overnight. Now she at least knew from the writings on the wall that the lighthouse had been a museum. Probably, like with their train car museum, the Lighthouse Foundation endowment's earnings had grown too slow to keep up with the costly maintenance in this planet's turbulent weather, this country's taxless tribal bands. Hard to pay staff at a government lighthouse. Who wants to scrub salt and barnacles off a brick when you could see the stars, or at least work on that billionaire's space farm as the New Age, New World white trash? Who wanted to chase away those purple jelly birds that clung to the white stone in the storm? Those flying jellyfish seemed fine with these hotter waters. She realized it's very hard to wear down some steel, some stone. A castle at the eastern point of Amerigo. At the end of our pointer finger, gesturing back homeward east, that's what the lighthouse was, had been, and maybe could be for her at least once more. A gesture towards some home she'd never known. Why leave the lighthouse for it to see the crash outside? She wondered about this from the safety of her empillowed nook, looking beyond the nautical flagpole that refused to fall to the crash site, and yet the big lighthouse might hold treasure. Not long ago, she'd dusted off the old exhibit she'd seen from its map how many seaborne ships the lighthouse had once saved, how many hadn't been saved, how many had left great treasures on the bottom of the Atlantean Ocean. How many had wrecked before they put the lighthouse out there? Some lady named Georgia Washington had commissioned it. Hard to read the name of this strange person on the plaque under the truncated flagpole. Looked like Georgia. They were dead, long dead, whoever they were. The lighthouse had a cistern still to catch the rainwater which it caught all the time, leaving it often full, and plenty of wildlife nearby in the woods all along the point. She still had her bow and razor-tipped arrows. She still had her traps. She still had her harvest basket. After weeks at the other museum, she had realized her museums and her downtown's emptiness wasn't a fluke, but a new status quo that Mom wasn't coming back to her. Not there, likely, and not anytime soon, anyhow. So she packed up whatever could be useful, whatever was left, and headed alone eastward towards the lighthouse. A castle would be stronger, safer, cozier than a bunch of busted down rail cars. Well, it had never occurred to her to climb up the great tower to turn the spotlights back on. Why would it? She had the solar cells and wind and tidal generators and battery packs. Even the deep freeze still worked, though she had yet to properly stock it with any of her kills. She hadn't killed enough to justify a backstock. A lighthouse seemed a silly thing in a world of rockets and storms, its little light. And yet this rocket had still half sundered despite digital navigation. From the deep nooked window in the tower, she'd watched it crash, heard the clanging on the crags, the colossal clap of stainless steel on sand. Fuel spent from the long journey, its shipment had crashed with it, and that had given her clue. Before that moment, she'd already slowly stockpiled various supplies from the small towns along the way, using a horse-drawn boat trailer outfitted with old boardwalk where the hull might have gone had there been a boat to haul. It worked like a flatbed, boards forming a level bed on the trailer, and the trailer hitch latched to harness, slow yet sure. More supplies she'd sought only on obviously clear days, and then she found cute things from other parts of the lighthouse buildings to fill up the room directly beneath the tower, close to the cistern and near the tower's entrances. Well, something was missing, though. From her great pillow fort in the lighthouse nook, she had seen the rocket fall clean out of the sky in the windstorm. It had used landing thrust to land on its tail and stand straight up. However, it had not accounted for the change in the weather nor the wind differential at this sharp island point of Montauk, where all sea winds meet, nor its high tide that, according to the exhibits, had once been well used in surf casting, and how all of these things had completely shifted and cracked the landing platform from the last takeoff. Before it even touched the platform, the sea had destroyed the water-cooled steel plate that the world's landing pads used to absorb heat from takeoff and landing, as the rocket by landing thrust had shattered the platform itself. When it tried to compensate for a cracked platform to land in the midst of the storm and the fog, the navigation hadn't done what two good old human eyes in a command tower might have done. Had she had a radio or a communication array, she would have warned the rocket it hadn't seen the rocks. And like the wooden hulls of old boats, the friction welded stainless steel had rammed into them and plummeted downwards. Stainless steel is so much cheaper, but so much heavier than aluminum and carbon composites. It hit hard. After minutes staring at the big wreck from her lighthouse nook, ears ringing, the smell of hot filings in the air, she had thought she had seen the subtle shape of a spine or maybe spines in the window of the vessel. She hadn't been sure. Certainly not at that distance, even with the binoculars. Imagination plus the glimpse was enough to make her decide. Treasure, not coziness. Throwing on her high weather gear, down to the great hull of the thing, it lay sprawled out on the beach, rocks, sand to the south, the length of the entire property. Laying there like that, one unfamiliar might conclude someone had poorly tried to fuel the entire island using propane, and had abandoned their attempt when the bad weather had cracked the long tank. But she wound down from the still green hillside, along the rocks, brambles to the beach, found a boulder that would let her perch high enough to see inside. Climbing was slick, and yet her grip held. Up close, and with her face in the main viewing window, she confirmed its stacks and stacks and stacks of spines. Leather and buckram spines. She gasped. Books! She'd never seen a book before. She'd learned to read, of course, but only with scratches of chalk on chalkboards. Mom had also taught her to read using the text on the museum signs and street signs they'd hoarded in the Riverhead Railroad Museum. That museum amounted to little more than so many abandoned railroad cars of various eras filled with so much obsolete junk. She'd only heard books, real ones. Nothing like this. No, nothing like this. This shipment had been meant to jumpstart a library in the wake of all those late 20s book fires. A library somewhere in the desolate isle. Having run a museum, even one so small and crappy as theirs, well, she knew that anywhere from 90% to 99% of artifacts remained in storage, especially art museums and hyper-specific history museums. Theirs had hid inside a boxcar. At any given point, only a small fraction faced the public. Their storage of a kind had been redundant train car, mostly on site for its exterior looks. It had once hauled pallets, and it did so again. Storage for the 99%. The same, she assumed, was true of library storage, especially big ones, old ones. They're mostly archives with a small portion usable, a small portion checked out at any given point for research or pleasure, or both. And a world didn't have any libraries anymore. They were lucky to get a video call, let alone a book. So maybe someone had sent their storage, their backstock, stacks. Well, that reminded her. Who had driven the ship? Or ridden? Were they okay? A massive crack in the middle of the hull was leaning in the rain and the waves, and a voice in her head, not her own, said, "Not in the rain and the wet." That was bad. Bad for books, and she'd once heard Mom at the other place. "Mom," she whispered. But she wanted to check for survivors, since books, at least in her mind, were written and kept by people and were meant to draw you towards other people, even long dead people, and truth and love and beauty. She climbed into the thing. She cut her hand on the hull really bad, and her mind clouded by the sight of all that water on the pages, but the pain in the palm won out. She put pressure on it by ramming it against her thigh and searched in her pack for some butterfly stitches. Rather, she had a blue zipper and red surgical glue. The glue worked. She pushed against the two sides of the palm together in a red squish, and she used the liquid stitches on either side. And then she slapped the zipper on, added liquid stitches to the middle, the wound itself, and literally zipped her palm meat shut. Then she wrapped it in gauze, gloved the whole hand, and wrapped for protection. Looking up again from her first aid, she assessed the inside. Well, none of the white inside walls had locked their various compartment doors. Whoever thought all white was cool had never been on their feet in a museum or selling apartments for most of their life. The paint job gave her headaches. It felt to her like the inside of a boneyard held up by scaffold made of bones. They had lined the insides of this rocket with circular shelves that clearly worked better when upright or in space, and most of the cargo ties on the bookshelf had held the volumes inside and secure. On impact, the harsh truth, the cold beach, many ties on the opposite wall, now the ceiling overhead had broken loose from inertial torque. Now piles of books had clustered and clumped like so much silt in the riverhead, and they found whatever purchase, walls, another shelf, a seat, another pile of books they could find. From that first purchase, they stacked, and so much literary plaque in the artery of that mechanistic fuselage. which meant that she needed to not only climb over architecture inside the hull of the crashed spaceship to get to the cockpit, she also needed to climb over books themselves. Some of the blood from her palm got on one of those covers, smaller volume. It made pretty good blood pattern. After admiring it a few moments, she had then ignored the bloody title and moved on. She slipped on a stack that tumbled down the curved wall-turned floor, and it felt like trying to climb through the world's cleanest, brightest, biggest clogged sewage pipe. The pile of books that had slipped stabilized soon, but she had to get to the cockpit, to the flight deck. What if someone inside was hurt worse than she? It took ducking underneath the seats that hung overhead, climbing over others that obstructed her path, bordered on both sides by books. Others uh, Others she passed uneventfully, hanging as they were from the ceiling. Two more ingresses, one of the doors stuck half iris like the eye of a giant who had fallen of natural causes on the battlefield. It would take some doing to get through. One of the door's spiral teeth seemed stuck in a bent outward position. She looked around. There on the floor, a tiny paintbrush, undipped. She took the handle of it and jammed the pointy side into the bend. No luck. She looked around again. There was a weird mail plug for some sort of hard drive or something hanging from the wall. It was huge. It probably could handle so much information all at once. So many digitized books. She cut it loose and used it something like a crowbar, what with that taper either manufactured or bent into the tip. That worked. Through the dead door, then, she climbed. Through another. As she knocked on the door to the flight deck, no answer. It was, from her perspective, about 30 degrees up the wall. She tried pushing on it, expecting some awful smell to meet her. It not only came open, it came open easily, and she climbed in, and no one was here either. Wait, what? No one to save? No one had flown this ship? She looked back down the whole length of the thing, clearly designed for human habitation, travel. Her chest tightened. The world's most beautiful mobile library. Empty? It tightened even further. A catch in her throat, holding off the tightness. That wasn't what she'd wanted at all. She'd expected someone to be in the thing, living or dead. She'd secretly hoped Mom had returned, almost magically. She wanted her mom, especially after the bad. But no, Mom was not here. Mom was not coming back, and there was also no one like Mom here. After weeks at the other place, she had realized her museums and downtown's emptiness wasn't a fluke, but a new status quo. And she realized it now again. Mom wasn't coming back to her. Not anytime soon, anyhow. It didn't matter that she couldn't hunt. It didn't matter she could harvest. She could hunt. It didn't matter that she could harvest. It didn't matter that she'd taken great advantage of the cistern and the tower and the rest of it. Her palms sweated against the pounding in that tight chest. It hurts to hold back that many tears for that long. She let one loose. She couldn't help the pressure of it. She figured she'd haggle with the emotion. It trickled down her nose, and it pulled right to the end of it. Alone, just like her. On the edge, just like her, that tear, and she half punched it away from her cheekbone with her cut hand, which hurt like a wildfire hot brand she hadn't meant to grab. Blood on her nose from her hand. She was angrier, so she punched with her other hand, and the dull punk resounded as if the stupid ship were laughing at her. So now what? Well, at least her palm was fixed. She'd go ranging again, but then she looked back the whole length. She climbed over books and seats and things. She saw again the great organic stilicide formed by the busted metal hull, water pouring in on the pages. How could she fix that? Was it worth it? The vision of it went blurry, not from the water from the water within. She pretended it hadn't. Mom would have loved seeing these books. She wished she had a way to show her mom, but that was a bargain no one would accept. Were there one here to accept it? Mom was still gone. Surely it was worth it, fishing the stilicide, saving some of those pages. She hadn't ever seen a full book, however much she'd been trained to read on rusted signage, let alone this many. Her heart caught in her chest, thinking again of what all that Water and salt would do to them. It caught too as she took in the sight of all of them. With that many books could teach her fellow humans. This haul of books was priceless. She jumped back down, sniffling, pretending to herself that she hadn't cried more and meditating on the books and the waterfall ruining so many, and hustled over to the main breach where the water was coming in the fastest. She had her satchel. She had her backpack. She'd brought her harvest bucket. Those three, in searching below, she tried to fill by picking out what titles looked the oldest, wisest, perhaps rarest, but how could she know for sure? Particularly when all of them felt rare to her. She could only read the titles and only had enough trouble to judge them by their covers. Not all the oldest looked the oldest. Not all the oldest were the best. Not all the newest had withstood the test of time yet. Amarius Victorinus stuck out to her bedside beside its brother Gregory of Nyssa. But so did The Secret and The Prayer of Jabez. Sappho and Hildegard of Bingen and The Divine Comedy and Les Miserables caught her eye, but so did A Modest Proposal and Mein Kampf. Some looked pretty, and some looked ugly. Some most excellent and beautiful, some downright evil and dangerous in the wrong hands. She knew she'd pick wrong eventually. She may have already. An ancient copy of Toni Morrison looked out at her alongside some random title for, she guessed it was for the feeling of the end of summer, a sort of Augustine state, or maybe the confessions of the month of August. How could a month of the year confess anything? She chose as best as she could from among them, favoring curiosity and reverence for wisdom, gathered her haphazard selection in the bags as much as she could, and clambered out and ran to the lighthouse. She went to the freezer, which was still empty, and she dumped the sopping wet books in there. And then she tried to stack them nicely. For the return, she brought out the rocket bolts of plastic and duct tape she'd found in her lighthouse. About a dozen more trips it took to fill the freezer with what she, completely arbitrarily, deemed precious. She'd have to figure out how to dehumidify them from the ice, but at least the freezer would keep out the bugs and the mold for now. On the return to the hull, she added staples, a couple of rugs, then boards. She chose 1x4s because of the weight and her size. It still took forever just to get the boards down there. She wished then she had more of a water polo build than a runner's. First round, both for the back end of the breech and the larger end that included the cockpit, she rigged up a great makeshift air and water lock. Sounds more convoluted than it sounds more convoluted than it really is for a 12-year-old. She did this with the plastic and duct tape. Well, that was actually easier than the boards. The biggest hefting came from the plastic roll. The horse had helped with that. It didn't make it easy, just possible, like most things when they try to help most things. Returning with a dry bag covered by her thick all-weather poncho, she picked out an entire set of Harvard classics and ferried those back to the lighthouse. She made up simple shelves out of ancient layered fruit baskets, the one with the wooden shivs and the tiny nails. She lined one entry wall of her brick nook with those. She had another big shelf she made from a few hollowed-out MTA electrical wire spools, wooden ones. That shelf she left in the main hall. Well, that first night she read for hours. She quickly learned that books would take so much longer than others. Some books would. They were dense, like trying to eat an acorn straight. But she devoured them page after page after page. Some went down quick as berries, some as slow as deer jerky. And the one about August turned out to be about a man who rented his whole life in terms of fessing up. Recounted his whole life in terms of fessing up, of everything he'd gotten wrong, everything that was his responsibility to fix, things he needed help with, things that commend his own character. The Mein Kampf one did the opposite. The man acted like the victim of society. Well, she judged the latter by the light of the former. She wanted to be the kind of person who could freely say, "My bad," than the one who blamed others. It didn't make her happy that the evil man had taken Mom. She was still livid, but she couldn't control that, and even if she had, would doing back to the bad men what they'd done to her mom make her any better? She'd still be stuck with herself. She fumed. What could she fix? She fell insomnia, and she woke In the lighthouse nook, the rusted white naval flagpole clinging to the morning, the gossip of a couple of real green parrots on migration from Greenwood, and any poets hiding there, 5 jelly birds clinging to the white outbuilding until the clanging scared them away, and they flew off billowing. She had to spend half the day reading. She had wanted to fix the thing, but she had also wanted to learn. When she read, she felt a bit guilty that she wasn't saving more books. And when she was saving more books, she felt a bit guilty that she wasn't reading them. She opted for half a day reading by the dim light, half a day saving by the good light. In the dim light, what with the charcoal on the white walls downstairs first, and then using a fountain pen on a journal she found, she transcribed what she could. How did she use a pen? Ink she'd read up on and made from a black, uh, a lamp black holding a plate over a candle, collecting soot, adding it to the blend of some water-resistant pine resin she'd hoarded for fire starter. She thinned it with an old can of turpentine, wild honey, and a seagull egg. Best version she could muster of a recipe she'd found. Using ink, she copied down what she'd read to get a feel for writing it. The other half she spent securing the fuselage and getting as many books into the tower as possible. It took weeks of work, weeks. And not long after that, a drone ship topped with its landing pad crashed on the other end of the point down a ways. Its landing pad shattered as well, and the second rocket missed. It fell into the sea. It had not been empty, but rather exploded in hell and fury. What in the world? Again? She stood, shocked at it. Not nauseous this time, though the ringing and not nausea this time, though the ringing in the ears followed the sound of the crash. Oh, this time it felt like 1,000 ants crawling on the underside of her forearm skin, up and down with a high-pitched ringing. Her lighthouse tower was then pocked with shrapnel. Those sounded alternatingly, like tools falling on stone floors, the lesser mud landing in greater mud, and like so much ice cracking and breaking, a window shattered somewhere above, letting in the storm. She'd have to fix that. She sighed. It smelled like the world's largest fart on fire, which sounds funny until you consider the scale, and then it's not funny anymore. The world's largest fart on fire in the mind of a 12-year-old girl prompts the kind of throw your head back laughter that exposes the neck for the slitting. She stopped laughing and sobered herself immediately. A couple of trees, much closer in the middle distance, were felled in the blast. That created a second, and a third crash, and a small brush fire started. Luckily, the rain put a stop to that rather quickly. She realized then that unless she did something, this would grow into a common occurrence on the island's point, and she wouldn't get this lucky without the brush fire again. Perhaps it had been happening all up and down the island, and she hadn't known. Perhaps shipments had been trying to get to them for a kind of rescue from without, a rescue from the ashes of civil society, and they hadn't known. Perhaps, judging by how awkwardly the things tried again and again to land, to readjust, to learn the better way to land, something bigger had been going on, some greater catastrophe beyond her knowing, her doing, her seeing. Something had gone terribly wrong. That, or the rockets couldn't handle the weather on Montauk Point anymore. To get a little light on again, had a twofold problem. First, normal boats traveled more or less on a two-dimensional plane. The plane itself might rise or fall with the weather, but a boat moved along either the north-south or the east-west plane of axis. For a boat, the lighthouse beacon only needed to spin a beam along a horizontal axis. Spaceships move through space, all of it. So that added at least a third dimension. A rocket wasn't like an airplane that needed static lights down a series of telephone poles. These rockets came in quick, hot, straight down or with some ridiculous curvature, and would likely miss the point if they didn't have some sort of visual for onboard cameras. The lightning alone in that area created all sorts of infrared noise for the infrared cameras. You needed to see to move forward. Well, you could from portholes, right? Lighthouse Nook reminded her of the portholes in most of the spaceships. She could see whole universes from inside the Nook, first in the books, and from whatever else they might try and land out the window. And with the three-dimensional problem, she needed to think of how they could see clearly to try and land. Light needed to pierce an even thicker cloud than an Eris pass. They had a dozen backup Fresnel lenses of different sizes from the exhibits when this thing had been a museum. She'd mostly used them with their hinges as pretty, crystalline cabinets. But now, with the problem she had, she unburdened them of the fresh apples and heartwood pine. After unloading squirrel like one of them of nuts, uh, After unloading squirrel like one of them of nuts and loading another bear like of berries, a third mechanic like of spare springs and pistons, she ended up with 6 large lenses at the base of the tower. She hooked all the wires back up, the ones she knew to hook up to anyway, to the battery, to the extension outlet, to the light itself on top. She held her breath, flipped the switch. It didn't work. She checked all the wires, saw the hookup, and then realized a different circuit managed the higher wiring than the one in the nook. She flipped the breaker. That worked. For a lighthouse meant to help seaborne vessels. But anyway, it still worked. At least no boats would crash. She looked out the main window. It was a howler of a day. She would soon go through her routine. But to the south on the drone ship that had already failed for the one rocket that exploded, another started to land. No, 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 she said, into the northeast, to the other shore. Her pleading mattered little. It was clear at the last second the pilot or autopilot had seen the light from the tower. Emergency boosters had activated. By the time it was low enough to see the horizontal beacon, it had hit the pre-destroyed drone ship and fallen to its doom, adding a great drum and cymbal clang to the howling of the wind. She decided to join it with her grief. High wind turned the entire lighthouse tower into a woodwind instrument. On these days, the various harmonic waves, the positive integers of the fundamental frequency, the resonant frequency of the tower, and its accidental sound holes, doors, windows, cracks, sounded out depending on wind speed. A perfect octave, a perfect fifth, a doubled perfect octave, a just major third, another perfect fifth, a septimal minor seventh. Now and again it would sound out a Pythagorean major second or a lesser undecimal tritone, but those were exceedingly rare. It was, in short, its own chorus. So she'd pulled out the old plastic recorder she'd found, and she played second fife to the lighthouse's first pipe. It had taken some practice, but eventually, together, she and the lighthouse had sounded something like the world's largest bagpipe. An elegy, a threnody for her rockets, for their markets, for their mothers, that the rockets had been borne out in the parts of other ships, for their makers who had either died or failed them, for her mom, for the lost books too, the lost embalmed minds. It stirred her soul to make that much music while the world outside howled and raged and struck down trees with its fire and its brimstone and thunderhead along, leaving everything damp and moldering with the crashing of dead rockets. A stillness came to her in the tower. Her ears rang in the wake of the crash, the howl. And when they settled down, she could hear a subtle churning up top, up where the spinning shadows of light danced. The lighthouse motor turning on. She needed to get the lenses up. She read and read about lighthouses of Captain January and the Stormcatchers, and the lighthouse at the end of the world, which resonated way, way more than she'd like, and Annihilation. The P.D. James one, The Light Between Oceans, one called Lighthouses of the Mid-Atlantic Coast, helped her a good deal, as did another one that she was, was more of a mechanic manual. The first thing she did was to get some clear plastic as protective shielding and put a smaller lens on top of the black roof of the tower. The wet roof went smooth as dewy glass under her boots. She almost fell the first time and immediately realized her need for a harness. And then she did fall. The first belay snapped off. As she fell further, the second, the one on the black railing leading from beneath the glass and stairs held, she had time enough to grab the railing with her zippered palm. Fire, hell, shit, all three entirely possible. If she fell, then entirely likely. She hadn't ever hated heights, but then, just hanging with fire and hell and shit at the end of her arm, good grief, she hated them then. She breathed in, breathed out, breathed in, held it, and then yanked herself up and in against the burning in her palm. Tea. Yes, tea for a bit. A long bit. A good long bit with a book or three. It was bleeding again, though her palm, or through her palm, onto the cover. She unzipped it. It was healing. Would have a gnarly scar. She added more of the surgical glue. Zip. That zip hurt worse than the first. Sheesh. Once a bit calmer, she went back out again, this time securing the harness again. Out in the rain, the winds. She got the lens secured up there. How it hadn't fallen itself was beyond her, but grateful for the serendipity, she fortified it further with a sort of wooden cage. It looked like a parabola, the wooden cage with the plastic on top. Where had she seen that before, the parabola? It stuck out in her mind, and she went back to her fallen rocket library and pulled out a manual on photography. It had a series of lightning rigs, but one of them was an adjustable parabolic reflector. She looked back up the hill. She could barely make out the fuzziness atop of the spinning light. A parabola? But how? Took a few days of searching, but eventually she found an old body shop in a nearby ghost town with what she needed. She filled her backpack with 8 cans of the chrome spray paint and then made it back to the lighthouse for dinner and Dickens. The next day was awful. So rainy, so windy, so foggy. She couldn't even see the railing outside the lighthouse window, so she masked up and sprayed chrome on the sailing canvas she'd found in storage. She wasn't going to be sailing anytime soon. She slicked that up, polished it halfway through work. An eerie noise perked her ears, a slight trembling of her table. Another rocket had exploded somewhere at sea, not far away. She really hoped none of the lost rockets had people aboard. She feared some had, but once the canvas was painted and dried, the next day gave her a full hour of sunlight. She used it to climb the tower in the calm and rig up the canvas to the parabola that already secured the heaven-facing lenses. She put a light in the bottom of the parabola. She had both a heavenward Fresnel lens and a parabolic reflector. In the days ahead, she added 2 other Fresnel lenses at key diagonals, and then the end result looked something like a star in comic books, spinning light on the yaw axis, a great upward beacon at the top of the roll axis, and 2 directly opposed beacons steady on either end of the pitch axis. It was the best that she had. But it wasn't a mere horizontal plane anymore. It gave off far, far more than thrice the light. It was her Omni Lighthouse now. In the lighthouse nook, she had built the greatest pillow fort for where she inspected treasures from the big wreck and waited for spaceships to emerge that she might warn them with those great Fresnel lenses. She read, read. She filled up her lighthouse with her favorites from the fallen rocket. Well, that took weeks and weeks to get as much as she could, but she could still only bring in so many books. The rocket was gigantic. I mean, she probably only had 10% of the books it contained. It was a massive set of stacks. So she more or less weatherized the rest of it, stages, and used the rocket as an active library. Of course, the weatherization took an absurd amount of time for a 12-year-old girl working on cracks of an artifact that large. And of course, she used things like glued insulation, or welding should have gone. But she did leave it better than she found it. Day after day after day. It was haphazard, but it was happily hers, and she read and read some more, and some days spending the night in the rocket, some days trading out books in the lighthouse for ones in the rocket. Some of the stories reminded her of Mom, but she didn't want to think about that. Until, of course, the worst storm came. The high tide had trebled in the tempest. The wind had howled worse than ever, one of those lesser undecimal tritone days. The storm had turned the tower into a horrific hellhound of a train whistle. And when she heard that great grinding, like the sound of a giant's tricycle on a mountainside, she couldn't help but leave the safety of the inner room and climb the stairs to the beacon. There, down at the beach, the sea had risen up and lifted her rocket library, a civil society of books taken from her. No, no, please, but it was already floating away. Worse than floating, the crack in the hull had taken on water, and now the thing was sinking down and down. She had slept in that thing. Dear God, what if she had drowned? It wasn't just tears then. It was like that fear of falling, of Mom getting taken away again, being helpless to stop it from her vantage in the tower. She felt a panic, as if the entire place had been filled with noxious fumes. Somewhere in the rocket's plumage, both ends in the break had hit the bottom, and now it stuck in the sand. Half of it remained above the waters, taunting her. A half-submerged library tower with a third of its books ruined and none of the good ones accessible through that waterlogged. Well, it might as well have been a cave. She only had what she had in the tower now, book-wise. It felt like losing Mom all over again. The bad men had come not for the train museum. They never do. Nor the little classroom Mom had set up, the Long Island Railroad Museum Mom and she had kept, even improved, however much junk and however few printed sentences. But the bad men hadn't come for any of that. The bad men, of course, had come for the ammunition and for the medicine and for Mom, or Mom's body. They'd taken Mom while she watched, hiding in the unusable train car bathroom, like Mom had told her to do, but when they came, they'd taken Mom and most of the others downtown. The rest must have fled because when she'd finally emerged from the train car bathroom to check on the status of it all, she'd found not a soul, no sign of Mom, and now losing her rocket library to the ocean felt like losing her all over again. Perhaps with the lighthouse, she'd come back, but the books, spark in the sky, flash, a rocket. The real test then, the real one, the first major test since she'd turned on her Omni Lighthouse. It came down as hard, as heated as any of them, and she noticed down there a space had been made on the sand, just large enough, the space where the library had rolled steamroller-like and flattened the beach. That rocket was coming in too hot, but then it saw the Omni light of her tower, the rocks, the storm, the quickly approaching land. It slowed much, much faster, adjusted for the misting landing pad in a hover. It redirected to the beach. There in the light, it landed. No crash, engines off, and once it cooled, the ramp descended, and people started pouring out of it, waddling. She threw on her clothes fast as she could. She ran down to the beach to meet the people, down the hill, down the trailhead, down around the underbrush to the beach, and she saw them. Pregnant women. All of them, a ship of mothers. Not her mother. No, not hers, but mothers all the same. Storage for the 99%. The rest of us shipped out of sight, out of mind. Books were written and kept by people and were meant to draw you towards people, and she felt drawn to such as these. But there were so many, and she was just a girl still. She didn't know anything about delivering a baby, or feeding an army, or any number of things. What could she do with them all, or for them? She was only 12, and she missed her own mom. What could she offer so many homeless pregnant women, refugees? She wasn't some scholar. She could barely stack pillows and stay alive. She looked at the lighthouse, a light on in the nook. Books remained. She'd filled the lighthouse and the outbuildings with so many books, but in the glow up there, somewhere hid a small volume entitled On Reading the Old Books. A brown stain on its cover. Old blood. She looked down at her zippered palm. It had long healed. She looked up. With new eyes, she saw the buildings holding things saved from the wreck. Great might not have beens, both her and the books, gifts inexplicably existing in the abyss of storm and sea and dark, a whole archive of the greatest minds in history, and her, who had learned, who hadn't blamed someone else but faced her flaws and fears. She had saved the books, then this rocket, she could again. She turned to see new minds before her, new minds and new wounds. They would stand on the shoulders of giants if and only if they chose to climb. Maybe she didn't have to be a genius or the best. Maybe deference was enough. Maybe all she needed to know was that she didn't know. It wasn't like she had saved herself. She'd merely taken the chance of being saved from the wreck to save others from other wrecks. She didn't have to be the path for those mothers. She didn't have to be their life. She didn't have to become the greatest radiance of sun for them to solve all the problems in this terrible world gone awry. It was enough to turn on a little light in the storm. That's the Omni Lighthouse, which is the titular story of the anthology or collection of essays and stories that we're filibustering here. I'm seeing a pause that I'm noticing on this screen. Anja, if you're still there, are we cutting out? Are we doing okay? Can you hear me? I see Stefan and Scott joined. Hi, guys. Will, hi. It's good to see you. Jeremiah, it's great to see you. We're cracking a lot of people here, doing really, really well. Anja, is it cutting out? Or are we losing it? You there? Yeah, it looks like we're still rolling. I'm not sure if it's cutting out here. I'm not sure what this. I'm still learning the Substack interface here, so I'm curious what some of these things mean. Um, yeah, let's see. Okay. I'm gonna. Hey, Anja, is it still working? Is it cutting out or no? Will, Jay, Scott, can you guys hear me? Can't tell. Let's see here. I'm gonna do one more if I don't hear back from you guys, because I'm not certain it's still rolling. I'm getting like a glitchy thing down here in the left hand corner. It's entirely possible we had some technical difficulties I was unaware of. Um, I'm going to read a story called Belief Was Awful, which is a Santa Claus horror story. It's still rolling. Excellent. Okay, thanks so much. I thought it was, but yeah, it has this like weird pause thing down in the bottom. So good to see you, Stefan, Scott, Jay Curtis, Will. Uh, everyone else is still in. We're getting close to cresting 100 viewers. So yeah, if you haven't shared it yet, please do. If you haven't subscribed, please hop in. Would love to have you as subscribers on there. If you're able to recommend the Substack on your own, that would be super helpful. David Bentley Hart quote begins this. It also ends Bellhammer's that wisdom is the recovery of innocence on the far end of experience. Belief Was Awful from the Omni Lighthouse. It's one of the 2 Christmas stories in the words. They'd been the angry words of a grieving grandchild, nothing more, didn't he know? That final inkling passed through his mind. They'd been the angry words of a grieving child. Why would he think that, of all the things he could think? And yet nothing else came to his mind at the sound or what he saw when it landed beside him. Night, or as some would have called it, eve. The first time Grandpa had told him of Santa had been when he was 5 years old. And he's sitting alone, not way back then when Grandpa told him of Santa, but in the present. He's seated, rocking inside by himself on Eve. Back then, Grandpa had told him when he was 5, back then and not now. He had wondered at the story. He had learned the naughty and nice list. He had behaved as best as he could, and in the morning, some new trinket, some new emotion had bloomed. Grandpa had always come early on the solstice every year, and he stayed with them for 4 days. And on the 25th, evidence of Santa arrived. Often he'd wait up late all 4 days with Grandpa. On solstice, he had, jealous for his grandpa's lap, beaten his sister the way that one chimp will beat another. And on Christmas, coal. Coal where presents ought to have gone. They thought that bit was a joke the stories had told, but it turns out naughty had more to do with nothingness. Grandpa had said he had to be grateful for coal and for his sister, or he could be grateful for anything else. Not because he was a bad boy, it was a gratitude thing. Believing in Santa, that too was a kind of gratitude of the mystery of being, the mystery of anything that might not have been, anything that might die on solstice before Christmas had a chance to arrive. A counterpoint of life came to mind. Had it been Grandpa that, hadn't it been, sorry, a counterpoint of life came to mind. Had it been Grandpa that had dressed up as Santa that first Christmas he could remember? Or had it been Santa? Well, Santa wasn't real. So then why is he sitting inside alone on the eve, staring at his massive fireplace without a fire inside? It's frigid. The heat's off. He needs the fireplace. It's eldritch, strange, uncanny. A faint memory brought him here before the cold hearth in his grandpa's rocking chair. The faintest memory he had buried deep inside on a whim, a passing impulse. Solstice. It had been solstice with spiral clouds 4 nights prior, and that made this the eve. Those together had stirred him to sit and rock and watch and wait. No matter where he'd gone, Grandpa had always been there for a story on solstice and a story on eve. He paid more or less attention as a tween, but in teens he reasserted his connection to the old man. And now, as he sits on the rocking chair, staring at the huge empty fireplace, he thinks of how he has no wife, no children. His mother still asks when he's going to marry, every Christmas. If only she could discover what had happened to him in the past, discover the truth of the old man at the center of his wonder. And yet he guarded his grief like a miser. He would hate the idea of his grandchild, hungry 80-year-old mother, or any of his college friends with kids bitter at his grandpa, envious. It may sound silly, but to him, if they knew why he'd never married, why he was so stuck, they might not think about their grandpa as nostalgically as he did about his, as gilded and silvered and wondrous. They might grow bitter, jealous, push him to move on. It's not that he didn't want kids, grandkids. It's not that Grandpa showed up for it, or it's that Grandpa showed up for everything throughout his teens and his 20s. Every time he worried about the kind of story his life would write, the kind of plot, the hard decisions before the big scenes, Grandpa would show up and cheer him on. Grandpa would buy him back to school shoes. Grandpa would get him his first beer. Maybe it wasn't the kind of motivation that could last forever. Maybe it was unreasonable to have expected that deep within. Perhaps it was just the unwinding of things. Not only wind up toys wind down. People do too, however much it pains us. Sometimes societies wind down, families. While returning again to the present, all memory of his living mother subsides. So too have reflections on children that he never sired, loves that flamed out due to his listlessness, high school reunions he never attended. Perhaps that's uncharitable to all those loves and friends, what for the depth of meaning they'd added to his life, and yet it's true. He didn't think of them. He didn't care. Not on solstice. Not this solstice. Because he's staring at the empty fireplace and all the carbon writ there, longing reflecting. He remembers how he floated through the next phase, how he carried on, trying to manufacture nostalgia, sometimes with drugs or other things. Yes, when he faced a mirror, he never got the shoots rooted out from his soul. He never could compare any experiences to Grandpa. That's why when the old man died, it upended his core internally in a way he could never communicate to any of them. Kind of inverted gravity. He couldn't speak of it anywhere, and neither at the funeral nor anywhere else. He carried it in silence. He carried it like a criminal sentencing, a yoke on his shoulders, a hard and heavy yoke. He'd been forced to return to his internship, so absolutely nothing tangible in his life shifted at Grandpa's passing, and yet the intangibles predicate all. Green and red again went up on the next holidays, but now they felt more mere topiary. When wonder dies, when you journey headfirst into naught, it leaves no trace, and yet it echoes a song in memory. Apparently, when someone suffering from Alzheimer's loses all other names and recognition, songs can bring them back. Songs both rote memory and entire narratives and smells. It's deep in there. He remembered the song of that frigid, darkest night. Yes, he was called a young adult, all hopeful for his career, when the whole family called him back to the Riverland to sing beside Grandpa. A song of tan shoes, pink shoelaces, a hymn, a Christmas carol, the fresh snow cone smell of winter. He was a young adult, and that unique kind of solstice had returned. He, an early bird, forced himself awake unto midnight with his grandpa drowning on his own fluids in the live-in home health bed his pharmacist's uncle had erected in the living room, watching it out the bay window. After the winter storm, the clouds had spiraled up towards the full moon on the otherwise darkest night of the year. It looked like Dante's angels. Sorry. It looked like Dante's angels or Jacob's ladder. He had long stopped singing, but he had watched the cloud maelstrom heavenward with Grandpa. Grandpa gurgled out his words. I'll be here this kind of solstice. How? He'd asked, anxious for what was coming. And Grandpa had said, layers and layers and layers you gotta bore up through to get to the light. He looked back out the window, the moonlight, the borrowed quicksilver sunbeams illuminating his soft face, and Grandpa's age spotted. He gently squeezed the leather-wrapped bone of Grandpa's hand, as if Grandpa had revealed Dante's secret, or Santa's, and it was up to him to anchor the old man here, hoping no eldritch force would steal him forever. Grandpa had said, next one comes 20 years from now. Ramblings of a dying man. To push back anyway, the spirit of debate sometimes roused his old tutor. Grandpa, solstice happens every year. You tell us stories every year on solstice. Sure, kiddo, but not like this one, Grandpa had said. He looked up. Grandpa had been right. Some weird weather pattern. The darkest night of the year and the full moon, a kind of spiral, as if the keeper of the dead were drawing them further up and further inwards. Tonight the solstice came. After a winter storm. Tonight the solstice came on a full moon. Tonight the solstice came with clouds spiraling upwards as if to deliver the dead. 20 years past that solstice had returned uniquely, as Grandpa had promised. And he sits inside all by his lonesome hearthside, fireless, failing to forget it. He had gripped Grandpa's grip, and had squeezed the leathern bones so gentle as if hanging on the carousel saddle. 20 years? 20 years from now? Grandpa, shake on a deal. Promise me something 4 years from now. Grandpa had chuckled hard enough to cough the fluids. Scoffed but gently through a faint smile. He had squeezed a little harder, as he might have done to a reindeer's ring. No, Grandpa, really. Grandpa, please. One more. Promise. If it happens again, in 40 years on solstice, you and me will get together like old times get together and watch the next solstice that does this to the clouds and the moon. Next time, we'll watch our solstice and wait up for Santa to arrive with presents like we always have. It was a silly thing to say as a college graduate to a dying man, especially aloud, but he'd said it. Silly words from a grieving grandchild. Grandpa had looked away from the bay window, and his eyes had glistened as he asked knowingly through a bitter grin, "Can you think of anything that might possibly happen to prevent us both?" He turned his face back to the spiraling clouds and had cried silently at the unspeakable answer. The grandpa had said little more, and he drowned on his own fluid. The Polar Express said Santa's silver bells stopped ringing for most kids as they grew, but some kids can still hear them when they're old. Grandpa had been one of those kids who could still hear it, even up to the very last asphyxiating sound. But him? He'd been one of the other kids. For whether it had been Santa or Grandpa, waiting up on Eve had yielded no presents on Christmas Day. 1 year without them was a fluke, 2 a statistical anomaly, but after the third Christmas he knew it would never again happen without his Grandpa in the world. Or it would never happen again without his Grandpa in the world. No coal, no presents, nothing. He hadn't wanted to stop believing, to stop hearing the silver bells, but some minds need tutors to hold their feet to the fire, else the fire goes out and the hearth grows cold. And his tutor had died on solstice, and now he sits as an old man, cold and dark, and there'd come a winter storm 5 nights ago. 4 nights ago on solstice came a full moon with clouds spiraling towards it. Tonight is Eve. And so the moment his ears prick up at the sounds of boot scuffs in the massive chimney erected inside the wall before him, anxiety floods his pulse. What else could he be ignorant of in this world? How else could it drive his fear? Grandpa? Or was it Santa real after all? Had he been a fool to question either? 40 years snapped together in an instant to make a single echo, time to time. Perhaps belief in Santa was not awesome, a wonder to an old and jaded man. Perhaps belief in Santa was awful, a horror. He scoots closer. Boot scuffs come again from high up, from the roof. They resound hollowly in the bitter dark of the brick. He crawls on hands and knees, as quiet as he can, towards the hearth, until his palms and pants grow gray with soot and ash. Then he peers up the black, scoured chimney. High up, a form has shone at the chimney's hole, backlit into a bodily shadow by the spiral full moon behind. A song comes to mind, a song he hasn't thought of since he sang at bedside, the memory, a spiral-clouded solstice and eve. If it happens again in 40 years, you and me will get together like old times. What could possibly happen to prevent us? The boot scuffs shouted him closer as some large humanoid form climbs down towards him. Something thuds loudly beside him. He turns his gaze away for just a moment to see the blackened lump of coal. They had been the angry words of a grieving grandchild. Nothing more. Didn't he know? That was Belief Was Awful, which is a Santa Claus horror story. So maybe Santa Claus isn't wonderful to everyone if someone doesn't believe. How we doing? How's everybody doing? Anyone else? I know we're still rolling. Uh, uh, Share it around if you get a chance. We're reading from the Omni Lighthouse, a collection of essays and stories that are published over the years. Anyone have a preference on an essay or a story or a poem? Any questions going? slanderous accusations to be resolved later. Um, yeah, yeah. I think if we don't climb up really radically here from where we're at, viewer, I might stop on the next one, just so I can get something to eat. I'm pretty hungry, but feel like we're doing pretty good. You still with me, Jay? You still with me, Will? Looks like you guys are in here. I'm not sure. All right, let's do. Um, that's a heavy one. I'll let I want to do that after that last one. How about a personal story of pacifism that happened um, right around my house? It's called Street Violence of Another Kind. The other night, Tara, my wife, and I were walking home from rallying friends, neighbors, and artists in the neighborhood to our friend Wendy's presence, the Asian night market, for her Quietude studio booth. We walked up to the second highest hill in Brooklyn, sea level to 177 feet, 54 meters in a mile, hiking up 35 feet per block with a 50-plus pound cart after a 13-mile day to give you a visual of a typical Wednesday. Anyway, we went to the top of the hill late, 10 p.m., doing a few laps around our house to finish our conversation and night tasks. And that means we detoured a block or two from our house several times. We avoided a favorite park, a favorite pizza joint, bright lights, our house, detouring. So is it the Providence, or sorry, so it is that Providence, Kismet, works its hand. For we came to an intersection 10 blocks from our house that we passed a million times. Tara often is better at the situational awareness than I am. I tend to be better at the cultural agility that her. Both are needed, according to our long-term mentor, Gordon Ventrella, and Tara noticed a scuffle across the street. A Chinese pauper with a cart wrestled an elderly Orthodox Jewish man, the top hat, the black suit, the pale sideburns. I couldn't tell who was fighting whom, why, or how much violence was involved, but it was loud, aggressive. Bags were being ripped. Recycled bottles were being flung all over the wet pavement. Again, it's dark. It's been pouring down rain for a week. Our climate's basically mid-century London at this point. I found in these intense street scuffles, no matter the party, that one urban husband word gets folk to wise up to their surroundings, their emotions, and their shame rather quickly. So I yelled loud enough to echo down the avenue, "Yo!" Dodged a couple of trucks in the rain to sprint across the street. They started scuffling again, and I said, "Yo!" They stopped up short. I was close enough to see the pauper collecting bottles was a young Chinese woman in rain gear. "What's going on?" Well, by that point, I realized that it wasn't a hate crime, as I've come to expect. The swastikas and similar symbols have increased on the subway under the current administration. We always clean them off with rubbing alcohol, so is violence. But rather in this instance, the elderly Jewish man was the aggressor on the poor woman. He was tearing apart her bags and trying to break her cart. "Whoa, whoa," I said, "what's going on?" "Tell her," he said, breathing heavily. "Tell her she can't do this anymore." "Do what?" She was shouting in Cantonese at me, pleading, screaming. I held up my hand. I looked at her eyes. "Peace," I said. "Hold on." "She comes," he said, "every night and goes through my trash. It's private property. It's my trash." "Tell him," she said. "Stop breaking my cart. Tell him I can. Tell him." They start shouting over each other again. You see, this is kind of the problem with our country. There's no more reconciliation, no confession, no absolution, no working through issues together, no mediators, no arbiters. The courts have been overrun for decades now in civil court. And the one thing judges beg you to try is to work it out outside the court. Well, we Americans default to legal counsel or cutting folks out of our lives. We don't actually try to yield to the basic terms of a debate and hash it out. It's why all of our debates aren't about substantive issues, but gotcha questions and name calling, slander, counter slander, false accusations of slander. People don't start out conversation with, "Here's what I want. Here's where I screwed up," but at very best, a passive aggressive, "I forgive you for," which assumes that the forgiving speaker is some objective standard of morality, wielding a kind of weaponized forgiveness for a list of bitter grievances. Whatever that is, it's not forgiveness. It isn't negotiation. It's self-righteousness perfected. But here was a golden moment. I'm a neighbor. neither Jewish nor Chinese in a way, in this city from the slightly elevated position, though not much. And here they were, both appealing to me, both frustrated, both scared or ashamed at having been caught. Brother, I said to the elder man, are you using this trash? No, of course not. It's trash. Is it treif? That's the Yiddish word for unkosher, unclean. Here's the thing. See, the man couldn't answer yes. If he said yes, his trash was entirely unkosher, then it opens him up for critique. Did he have pig bones in there? Were there burgers with cheese, mixed cloth? Of course, in some ways, the trash is unclean, but would he admit it? Would he go so far as to say it was unclean for her to take trash off his hands and away from his property? Of course not. No. Do you remember in your Torah when we harvest the fields? He looked shocked that I knew this. This is why we read the old books, folks, right here. He was shocked that we were in a Socratic dialogue now, a midrash on the law, a bit of Talmudic lore. He was intrigued, disarmed, nonviolent. Yes. And we're supposed to leave the corners of the fields, right? Yes, of course. For the poor, right? So they can eat it? Yes. This is the corner of your field, I said, pointing to his trash can. She's gleaning, brother, gleaning for trash corn. Don't you see? Those bottles are 5 cents a piece, a nickel. She's got to fill that whole bag just to get $30 and feed her family, and it's trash to you. You think so? You think this is like the corner of a field? I do. But my wife, he said, she hates this. She told me to come and rebuke her. Is your wife scared? Yes. How do I convince her? How do I change her mind? I'm not her therapist. Look, brother, I got a bride whom I adore, and yet sometimes our wives think things that have more to do with fear or envy than with what's right or good. True? He laughed. He was frustrated. Please, he said, tell her not to tell her my wife. She said, tell him. Peace, I said to her, to him shalom. And that stilled him. I talked for a while and circled back to the corn in the fields, and eventually it dissipated, and she walked away while I was talking to him about his marriage for a while. Are you Jewish? He asked at the end of all of this. Where do you serve? He was asking me whether I was a rabbi, at which synagogue I taught. Me, the guy in the long 1970s, hobbit, joined a metal band here. British World War I jacket I bought at an antique store by Warwick Castle for 10 quid. Soaking wet, old busted 101st Airborne paratrooper boots, nerdy rider, backpack on my back. Am I a Hasidic rabbi? I laughed. Dr. King said, nonviolence is the answer to the crucial moral and political questions of our day, to respond to violence and oppression without resorting to violence and oppression itself. It works not because it's passive, it's active. It's pacifism, not passivism. Love force, truth force, as Gandhi called it, or simply truth acts, prophetic speech acts. It's hard because it's creative. This is why I follow the philosophy and theology of play. So play, friends. Play in the corners of the cornfield with your neighbors. The rain was beautiful on the walk home, by the way. How was your rainy day? That was another kind of street violence. Again, in the Omni Lighthouse. How are we doing, John? I see you joined us. It's good to see you, John Overman. Delighted you're here. Anja. Hope everybody's doing well. Sweet. Very good. What are we feeling? We feeling a story? We feeling an essay? Feeling a poem? Academic piece? No opinion? Thumbs up. What are you working on, John? You working on anything specific? Flipping through here. That is a long one. That is a long one. I'm gonna do those. Um, Poem? You want a poem? I can do a poem. Poem. John, did I ever show you the blurb trolling piece? I don't know if I ever showed you that, where I trolled the blurb industry in my forward to my book. The poems are getting eaten by turning the page. When you put out a 900-page book, what I've learned is it's very easy to flip past the poems. So if I cannot find one, I'm gonna crack into the concrete and watercolor. That would be great. All right, here we go. Let's do it. I'm gonna do a few of these. Okay, so this is kind of, it's not like the titular poem, but it sets up the vision. It's called Blast the Shadows poem. You begin with a wash, perhaps of periwinkle, streaks of invisible slate behind it, another of sand, dandelion, bleached before, fresh, dried scab. It's the shadows you have to add, not the light. The light has been there since before St. Anthony, who left the urban lamppost on a hill, 7 hills, then 7 left to take it to the gates of hell. It's an offensive thing to say, to go on the attack, where the worms and wyverns slither low down to sunder Ouroboros' lemniscate hole, and take it to the wildernessy. That's where you'll find the dark. The city's awash with the cousin of the cave. It's the shadows you have to add in later on top. Hint of sun, if you and the neighbor boys accidentally knock a stickball too high over the towers into neighbor Greenwood's yard. Last, you'll have to add in the windowsills where the folk fled the falling towers, score marks from brimstone noose ghosts, the rust stains of the great hotel met controlled demolition between Gallery House and Blackface Whiskey Trader, again added later. The midtown fire hydrants and parking meters, sable paints that hide mud stains, SUVs of foreign dignitaries bartering their poor for your poor, nipple stickies, Oscar bases, the followers overshadowing the foundry of thought, black tie affairs, black Amex, blackout sales, scaffolding on scaffolding on scaffolding hitting in same eld black fish net from ye drag queen hide, not the brazen naked kind my father and Remy built. Scaffolds, I mean, you have to clarify here. For them at least, my father and Remy, I mean, they're light, then fishnet fishers, then fishers of men. Only then men fish caught in their own costumes. You start with a wash. Everything else rides the coattails of white canvas, a 1970s tuxedo, and a 35-year-old virgin groom who was the best men for all of his groomsmen. That's a city. And now, dear desert, thou mayest throweth thy tar, yet mid-pitch remember whatever its trajectory, that Buddha said, it's rather hard to kick a possessive pronoun. If we refuse to receive your gift of tar, to whom does the gift belong? And so that's kind of a setup for like all of the shadows of the dark side of the city that people always talk about, and they never think about the light and the good things in the city, specifically the poor. Here's one. This is a story that happened to me. So this one's kind of a personal essay and also um, a poem. It's called "The Horror of Providence." The ghost goes in the gray smoke high above and built of steel. Steel. Sorry, a thunderbird ghost in the thick of the night carries its light, carries its torch, carries its flashlight over the porches of Brooklyn stops a ray in the fog. I hammer my umbrella into the heights of every boxed-in elm and cherry, but not the dogwood. He's suffered enough. I wrap it to knock the rain loose that didn't wait for me to walk. The R isn't running around Brooklyn. I could take the D, but something told me stride up the hill to the B63. And there I pray and bid the barkeep good evening. After time, I test the route. It's there in 10. and 35 to drive me home. 45 to walk home is healthy enough. I let my mind wander as I might have. In my younger days, I take in the U, I rattle my umbrella, I greet a roar, another ghost. A night bird goes, carrying the fire in a clean beam. Almost an hour for the bus to even catch me by Sunset Park. In the cool, I have greeted Greenwood, whose gates are asleep, and notice now there is not one fence but two, a black iron and a stone. Leave them alone, one alerts me. Leave them, the other repeats to the alone. But why am I walking? Why this urge? Up Sunset, I climb with the city behind, past evening athletes earning their scores in football and volleys. My feet carry me to the corner exit between Ghosts and Climax to see an old man bowed in hunch, drunk enough to drop his face, bleeding profusely, blearily eyed, insisting no ambulance, swaying like those dogwoods during the rainstorm that missed me in my riding. The storm wall and the wings of the fowl gracing the waters with waters again. I walked him across the crosswalk in time, left him alone 'cause he wanted left. 2 blocks later, tell you I heard. Were this your grandpa, Remy? Then think. I'd turn around, I told the voice. It took 2 blocks backtracking, another half to catch this elder, 3 more blocks to bring him home. But walking him 3 blocks away cost me nothing. Nary a poem, merely a "Speak, Lord, your servant will listen." This, to me, is what we mean when we teach on providence. Um, there's a poem in here that just trolls Brandon Sanderson. He said in Tress of the Emerald Sea, Hoyd says that you can't make a rhyme with bulb, and I dispute that heavily. So this is me. This is Sanderson said that you can't rhyme with bulb. Sanderson said that you can't rhyme with bulb. Rhyming in lexicons often agree, neither considered. The mulberry tree, the bulbil of life axles, deeper medullas, bulbar paralysis, my vagus nerve, the verve of the mid-word dueling rhyme is better than slanting on pulp bulbously. I was just proof that you can. Um, it's concrete to watercolor. How we doing, everybody? We're at 3 hours, 40 minutes, which is great. It seems like the chat and the viewers have wound down, and I said I would keep going as long as we kept sharing it and winding up. It seems like we're starting to relax. Is that the vibe that we're getting from everyone else? Um, yeah, I think so. But I think I'm gonna wind it down here. Again, I've been on here doing kind of a filibuster read of this massive tome of the Omni Lighthouse, which has been wonderful to do with you, and just a history of essays and stories that I published elsewhere. But again, you can always check out Bellhammers, which I did the audiobook for. You can check out Tap and Die, which is like Die Hard in a fantasy world. Again, of Gods and Globes, I had Karen Warren, Howard Andrew Jones, Juliet Marillier is in this volume. I did some other ones with short stories like B Cube Press and other stuff. But there's number 3, the women's poetry anthology I edited. There's the Cold Brood graphic novel, which you may not have gotten yet. The young adults, kind of dark New York Narnia of Ulamaro. Then also have The Elevator Out and Harry Writes The Danger, which are children's books. Happy to read one of those real quick because they are poems technically. If anyone wants a children's book right now, as we close this out, I feel pretty happy about this. The number of people we dropped in. I hope there wasn't technical difficulties. It seemed like there was at one point, but Anja said we're still rolling, so I'm gonna just take that to the bank and hope that we're all good. Never tried this before. Delighted to do it. Very hungry, but but yeah, I think that we've hit kind of capacity as far as folks go. I will definitely do longer in the future sometime. But we'll do one more. We'll do the elevator out, maybe. I'll do Harry Rides the Danger. I don't know if you guys have seen this or not. This was written in the wake of the Joplin tornado, um, as a response to. Hey, thanks, Andrea. Yeah, any questions you have for me, throw them in there. I'm an open book. Like I'm happy to say whatever. Um, the Joplin tornado. These kids were playing tornado, and all their parents were like, "Stop, stop, stop! You're playing like you're dead." And the therapist said, "No, let them keep going." That is how they process it. And one of my buddy's kids, Mark Neinschwander, who does the free headshot day that we've done, that some of you have seen, uh, he had a very young boy that is now going to graduate high school, which is crazy to think about. Very, very, he was like 3 at the time or so. And he said, "Uncle Lance," after he was very scared. And then he went to this like makeshift carnival they had for kids to play and debrief and, have fun for the summer. And he rode this roller coaster and came and be, "Uncle Lance," he was shook his hands like this. I ride the danger." And I took those two things and kind of like teased it out about kids facing their fears. So we're going to work with this one real quick. They've used this, had trauma therapists buy this for, other children and stuff like that. I've also accidentally scared like large families. I did this at the poetry festival where it seemed like a kid could handle it. And then very, very protective, hovering parents, and they did not like this. I read it to a preschool class of 19 students that like took it very, very well. So sometimes it just needs a little tee up of like, "Kids, we're going to talk about facing your fears. What are your fears?" But anyway, um, Harry woke at night. In his doorway stood the danger, slimy, grimy, spiny danger, speedy, swift, rough, rugged, danger, huge, no huger than his bed. Harry said, "Hey, danger, I'm afraid of danger. Scared of slimy danger, spike covered, pointy, jagged danger, dark black shade, McShady danger. Danger, stranger than a stranger, go away." The danger turned, it walked away, but Harry followed danger. Out to the street, out under stars, Harry followed danger. Beneath the moon to mountain tops, Harry chased the danger. They rolled down mountain snow so bright, down to a valley by moonlight, then scuba dived in deep great lakes, then leapt above a pit of snakes, and ate 5,000 chocolate cakes, both Harry and the danger. The danger chuckled after cake, but Harry thought the danger laugh sound like a metal rake. He said, "Hey, danger, why'd you growl?" The danger shook his mangy jowl as if to say, "I never growl," but Harry didn't understand. Harry said, "Hey, danger, I'm afraid of danger. I'm scared of snarly danger. Want bumpy, knotted, gnarly danger, shiny, blinding, brilliant danger, danger, stranger than a stranger. Go away." The danger turned and walked away. Harry followed danger. Down to a redwood forest, down to a wildfire, burning city, scorching fire, red dead flaming, golden pyre, smoggy trees, fog, smoggy coughing, wild, wild fire. The danger drooped his back. "Get up, get on, my friend." But Harry said, "I'm scared of fire, scared of smoky wildfire, scared of burning danger, blaming flare and glaring, scared of burning danger, blazing, flaming, maiming danger, flaring, glare, and pairing danger, burn and burning danger." Who wrote this tongue twister for readers? I mean, really. Go away. The danger stayed, walked away. The danger stayed. "Just go away." The danger stayed. So Harry hopped on danger. Harry rode the danger back to the great big lakes. The danger filled his mouth with water, then his belly, Harry's hands that Harry cupped for water. The danger flew them to the fire, fought the flames, the forest fire, dumped on water, soaked that fire, saved the world from burning. After drenching fire, Harry yawned and yawned and yawned. Did it work? Did I get you? The danger took him back to bed where Harry fell asleep. But every time he sleeps at night, Harry dreams of firefights. Harry rides the danger. It's a great one for kiddos. I don't know how many of you are left on here because there's not. Ooh, that's a crash. We're going to pretend that didn't happen. How many of you are left on here. I can see concurrent views and I can see total views over time, but I'm not sure who all is left. Let me know if you're in the chat. John's here still. We got Anja here. Are you here? I don't know who all made it all the way. I'm about to hit the max on Substack's thing. But here's what I wanted to show you because I'm not gonna normally you don't show first glimpses of covers until you're ready to do like a cover image because like people have this like visual memory thing. You're still here, John's still here. Anyone else still here? I mean, you guys wrote it out for 4 hours with me. It's pretty incredible. So you're not supposed to show covers because the first time people see it, that's kind of like the thing. But this is something I've been working on for a while. It's a New York City horror novel in which a giant monster starts eating it. Anja, I think you might have beta read It Rides Upon Us, but I'm not certain. Um, anyway, I commissioned a subway tile mosaic from Lebanon, which is a great time to give money to Lebanon. With kind of the monster that I wanted on there. So I'm gonna let you guys see this because you hung in with me this whole entire time. Oh no, am I glitching out again? I don't think I am. Okay. Yeah, I really want you to be able to see this kind of as a as a treat since you're stuck with me the whole entire time. And people watch the end of the video. I doubt that'll happen for gobs and gobs of people. But okay, thumbs up. I'm still here. Okay. This is what I made. Look at this. It is a full black and white marble subway tile mosaic for It Rides Upon Us. So we'll paint in blood right here. It Rides Upon Us. My name, Lancelot Chaubert. I'm assuming you guys can see that right now. But yeah, it'll say It Rides Upon Us with the black marble and white marble. Like, I'll get this really close so you can get up to the nitty gritty detail there. Like, they're just so cool. So I love covers that are, as you can see with like bell hammers and stuff, the covers that are like actual tangible objects. And so I've just been leaning into that more and more and more. Like even, the women's poetry is yeah, you've read it. Okay. So what do you think about it? I'd be interested to see what you think about it. So like, the rainbow dyed carnation and like the bell hammers oil cans. I like stuff like that. So I think it's pretty cool to have this mosaic actually exist and be able to print it. You love it? You into it? Okay, cool. I think it's super cool. And that'll be like the full wrap around the spine and stuff. So it was actually cheaper than most of the book covers I've got. So I was like, maybe I should just like buy more tangible. There's the sequel to Bellhammers is going to be or one of the sequels to it is about a fire department. And I'm thinking about printing like an actual fire department patch and just taking a picture of the patch and letting that be the cover. I like stuff like that. So Gabriel Wilson is like my favorite cover designer of all time. But anyway, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up here. You guys stuck it out. You get the gold star for the day as it is, and I'm delighted that you hung in here with me. It was fun. I will do it again sometime. Maybe not essays and stories. Maybe I'll just like read a whole chunk of a novel or something. But yeah, it'd be fun, right? So yeah, and we'll see what it looks like in the back end and when people watched and whatnot. But thanks. Share the Substack around if you can. If you got the capacity to recommend it in your back end on your own Substack, that would help a ton. And appreciate you. Keep writing, keep reading, and we will talk very soon. I'm going to get back to writing and get off the video stuff. So grateful for all of you. Hang in there.